present Kenneth Williams, Peter Jones, Aimi MacDonald and Patrick Moore in just a minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you for that lovely warm reception to Just a Minute. And as you've just heard, we welcome two of our regular players, Kenneth Williams and Peter Jones, and we welcome two guests who have played the game before, Aimi MacDonald and Patrick Moore. The rules are going to be just the same. They're going to try and talk for just a minute if they can on a subject that I will give them without hesitating, without repeating themselves, and without deviating from the subject. And we'll start the show this week with Kenneth Williams. Kenneth, an apt title for an apt subject to start any programme, a grand opening. So can you try and talk for 60 seconds on a grand opening starting now?
The first thing that springs to mind would be the Suez Canal. One thinks of the vessels decked with bunting and the Empress...
Aimi MacDonald has challenged.
Deviation.
Why?
Well, I don't understand what the Suez Canal has to do with an opening.
Well, he'd only just started, Aimi. He'd only been going for 6 seconds. So, I mean...
That's long enough.
What are you talking about? Don't you realise this canal had an opening, didn't it? They'd had to be open, right? Yes, but I'm talking about the opening when the Empress Eugenie was there.
Aimi points out that it didn't have an opening, but I have pointed out that it has an opening at both ends.
A grand opening at the top end. Right, that was an incorrect challenge, Aimi, so Kenneth gets a point for a wrong challenge. He keeps the subject, and there are 53 seconds left, starting now.
There was a great opening for the exhibition with Victoria and Albert in attendance in Hyde Park.
Patrick,
the exhibition was not held in the Suez Canal. You're deviating.
I've gone on to another subject.
He's gone on to another subject, another opening.
That's what I mean. He's gone on to another subject, therefore he's deviating.
Yeah.
No, he's not deviating from the subject. He is not deviating from the subject of a grand opening, which is written on the card.
So what's the point of coming along here?
Stop worrying about the
Empress by all these idiots. I mean, I've come all the way from Great Portland Street. I'm not staying here.
Well, Kenneth, you are winning points because the challenges are incorrect. And so you get another point for there, and there are 47 seconds for a grand opening starting now.
A grand opening took place when I had a one-man show at the television centre when the producer said, your opening will be one of the hugest, most gala-like affairs that's ever been seen in this building, and we've even turned off the fountains because the water falling will put off all the typists who are supposed to be doing your scripts. I said, well, that's wonderful. Thoughtful. Such a thing would never have occurred to me. Ah, well, he said, you've got to take into account the psychological implications of water falling. A lot of people...
Patrick Moore.
Repetition, water falling.
Yes, you did mention that before. So that was repetition. And Patrick Moore has a correct challenge, a point for that. And there are 13 seconds left, Patrick. A grand opening starting now.
Grand openings can be of many kinds. They can, for example, be in the cosmos.
Aimi MacDonald.
I don't know what you call this, but he's talking about openings. That's plural, so it's
they
not the
can.
right subject.
Yes, he repeated they can, didn't he?
What?
Yes.
Yes, I was going to say that, actually.
Yes, I know you
After
were.
what I
could
was
see
saying
that
now.
you were, yes.
Yeah.
Aimi, you have the subject now with 9 seconds
I think that was
left.
sharp practice.
Oh, no, it's lovely practice when it's Aimi MacDonald. It's 9 seconds for a grand opening, Aimi, starting now.
Right, when I got up this morning, I put on this dress, you see, and down the centre,
you got it on?
there is at the bottom of this peculiar thing coloured in silver.
The whistle that Ian Messiter, the creator of the game, blows beside me tells us that 60 seconds is up, and whoever is speaking at that moment gets an extra point. On this occasion, it was Aimi MacDonald who was telling us about her dress that she said she got on, but only looks as if it's half on. And Aimi, you have a point for speaking as the whistle goes, and you have 2 at the end of that round. You're equal with Kenneth. And you're going to begin the next round, if you don't mind. The subject is the nicest one I know. And you can take that any way you wish. And you have 60 seconds in which to take it, starting now.
The night...
And you've been
Obvious hesitation.
I don't think you can call one of Aimi MacDonald's warm throbs as she starts to speak.
Darling, that was an intake of breath.
It
A
wasn't.
girl has to breathe, you know.
Don't. I've just said it was a warm throb. It's much better.
Yes.
Yes.
Don't
and
stop breathing. I enjoy watching it.
Peter Joan made that remark as he's sitting beside Aimi, and he's blushing at the moment, and he hasn't said very much. He's finding it very difficult this week.
So do I
grip of
get a
yours-
point?
Yes, you've got a point, Aimi. You needn't scratch your head, darling. The nicest one I know, 59 seconds, starting now.
The nicest one I know has 2 enormous large brown eyes, a very long back, and a thing on the end of his back that goes right down to the floor. It's surrounded by fur. He has 4 rather large feet. He also...
Patrick Moore,
I think I must claim hesitation there.
Yes, you must.
No,
there was a definite Yes, no, that wasn't a throb, it was an and Patrick has the subject now. There are 40 seconds left. The nicest one I know, Patrick, starting now.
I can't entirely agree with the description of the nicest one I know, as was in fact given by you. I do appreciate what you were trying to say. You were undoubtedly discussing one of our 4-legged friends, and I have nothing against this, mind you, because I myself have many colleagues of that nature. And the one to which I refer...
Peter Jones has challenged.
He's not an animal trainer. He hasn't got any animal colleagues, has he?
No, I don't think
Can't
animals
describe
are described
animals
as
as
colleagues. They could be... No.
Describe colleagues as animals, possibly. Not vice
It's
versa.
the same thing, but I will accept that challenge.
Well, that's very
Peter,
generous.
I think
of
I
you.
He will
absolutely right.
accept it. He's taking over the chairmanship, you know.
Yes,
you
you're
realise
right.
that?
I do. You were perfectly right, Peter. Do carry on, please.
It doesn't have to carry on till
I just received a message. Try not to thump table, it says. Right, it is.
For the sake of our listeners at home, you had a
Funny,
correct...
because she had her hands under the table when this happened.
Peter, let's get away from the thumping and get back to just a minute.
All right.
The subject is the nicest one I know. You've just had a correct challenge and you have 23 seconds left starting now.
Well, I'm going to describe this opening, which was, I think, the nicest one I've ever seen at the Theatre Royal, Drury Lane, just before the war, after they'd had all those peace conferences, and it broke out, and they had the Jack and the Beanstalk with Binny Hale and a lot of people milling around on the stage, the country square.
Aimi MacDonald.
Yes, I
That
know.
was hesitation.
I did.
You don't need to reenact it for us, Amy. I quite agree. Hesitation. So you have... Oh, very clever. Just got in before the buzzer. 2.5 seconds. The nicest one I know, starting now.
He has 4 very large feet and...
Aimi MacDonald, getting in just before the whistle, managed to keep going for those 2.5 seconds, so she got that extra point for speaking as the whistle went, and she's in the lead at the end of that round. Patrick Moore, will you start the next round? The subject is what I can do with my telescope. The audience enjoy the thought of what you might be going to
Well, I'm
say.
so glad to come back to this table. Kenneth and I have felt very left out, I may say.
Yeah.
Very pleasant. You'll be, Kenneth.
I'm looking forward to your...
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right, well, you're right in now. You have 60 seconds. What I can do with my telescope starting now.
What can I do with my telescope? Many people have suggested things that I could do with my telescope. They've even suggested stuffing it through the roof.
And Peter Jones.
Repetition of suggested.
That is right, Peter.
Well, I think you should allow a guest on the programme the odd mistake. Good gracious, where's your gallantry?
I think Patrick Moore has played the game often enough now, even though he is a guest, to
Right.
not...
And I think he's rather pushy, if you ask me.
Have you ever had the feeling of not being wanted?
I'm sorry about this, Patrick. I'm very sorry.
I do understand. With that table's I'll get tonight.
Here.
Yes, I
Patrick, you are wanted, but try and play the game. And Peter's got a correct challenge, 53 seconds. What I can do with my telescope starting now.
What can I do with my telescope? Well, the answer, as far as I'm concerned, is not very much. Because my youngest son took it to pieces many years ago. He was always taking everything I had pretty well to pieces, which is one of the reasons we never had another baby. Because we were afraid that he would...
Aimi MacDonald challenged you twice.
Oh, did you? I beg your
Yes,
pardon,
sir.
Amy.
It was all those little pieces, you see.
Yes. Yes.
A repetition
Yes,
of pieces, and Amy
repetition.
spotted it.
Yes.
And Amy, there are 41 seconds. for what I can do with my telescope, starting now.
I don't actually have a telescope, but...
Kenneth Williams...
Well, if she hasn't got one, why don't you shut up and let something... Shouldn't have women on this show. Always trying to get her oar in that one.
Charming.
We've got a bloke here who's an expert on telescopes. Yeah. If you don't know anything about it, why don't you speak on it?
Thank you very much.
He had the subject originally and lost it because he repeated himself. The charm and gallantry of our regular players of the game. Aimi, it doesn't matter, darling, whether you have a telescope or not. The subject is what I can do with my telescope, and you have to talk on that. And
what are you talking about? The subject, what I would do with my telescope? It don't matter if she ain't got one. How does it make any sense if she ain't got one? What can she do with it?
You didn't let me finish what I was going to say.
Oh, what was that?
You're here in a moment.
Wait and find
There
out.
are 38 seconds for what I can do with my telescope, Amy, starting now.
I don't actually have a telescope, but...
Kenneth,
Repetition, she told us that before.
yes. So, Amy MacDonald
That's
is...
not fair, darling. It's not.
It is really. It's absolutely fair.
But that was a whole new round.
No, it's not. It's the same round. You mustn't repeat any words you've used in this round. And you are in the lead. You're in a commanding lead, about 5 ahead of all the rest of the field. So I think we can allow Kenneth to talk on the subject now with 35 seconds. What I can do with my telescope starting now.
My telescope is something, obviously, I would be rather incompetent to deal with, since I am...
Amy MacDonald.
Well, if he's so incompetent, why is he talking about it?
By the same token, he wasn't deviating from the subject, but well tried, Amy, and the audience appreciated it. But Kenneth keeps the subject. It was an incorrect challenge. 30 seconds starting now.
I would go for advice to young Patrick, who would enlighten me.
Patrick Moore.
Deviation, I'm not young.
You're young at heart, Patrick, and you have 25 and a half seconds. What I can do with my telescope starting now.
There are plenty of things that I can do with my telescope. These ideas have been put forward from time to time. Many of them are entirely impracticable.
Peter Jones.
Repetition of time.
Yes, from time to time. 20 seconds, Peter.
But time has no meaning.
You repeated time.
Oh,
20 seconds, Peter. What I can do with my telescope starting now.
Well, I've got these bits in a plastic bag, as I say, which I've had for many years, and I can use the bits as magnifying glasses.
And
the
Two bits. There were two bits. Too many bits there.
Too many bits.
All very bitty.
Who challenged you or me?
I did.
So did I.
I got, you got in.
No, I give it to you.
Well, no, I mean...
Kenneth,
it's
you
up
got
to-
in first. Stop having a discussion with Patrick Moore. There are 13 seconds. What I can do with my telescope starting now.
Place my eyeball at its end and view the constellation unfolding before me. Look at night at
Patrick Moore is
Sirius.
challenged.
Deviation and constellation can't unfold. It's there already.
Correct challenge, Patrick. 6 seconds are left for the subject starting now.
Viewing constellations through a telescope is something that cannot be done even by the most enlightened. A telescope, of course, can be used...
So Patrick Moore was then speaking as the whistle went, telling us the 60 seconds is up, and he got that all-important extra point. He's equal in second place with Kenneth Williams, but they're still 2 points behind Amy MacDonald. Peter's trailing 2 points behind Patrick and Kenneth, and he's going to begin the next round. The Wild West, Peter. That's the subject, and will you tell us something about that in 60 seconds, starting now?
Well, funnily enough, only 2 days ago, I returned from the Wild West, and I'm here to say it's not nearly as wild as...
Patrick Moore.
Challenge withdrawal. Repetition of wild was in the title.
No, it's on
yes,
the
I'm
title.
sorry.
You can repeat the words.
I'm
Don't
terribly sorry.
apologise, just to...
I apologise.
There you are, you see. Too
Peter's
pushy altogether.
I'm terribly sorry. I'm terribly sorry.
He's delighted because he's got an extra point for a wrong challenge.
I'm terribly sorry.
53 seconds, the Wild West, Peter, starting now.
Now, fortunately, because of that great man, whose name I probably am not allowed to mention, had made it more accessible than ever before. You can fly there terribly cheaply and come back, and as I was over the...
Amy MacDonald.
As I,
Hesitation, yes, Amy. 41 seconds are left for the Wild West, and you start now.
I have actually been to the Wild West. Cactus and mountains and grass. Not,
Patrick.
Hesitation.
Yes, Patrick. 33 seconds
I was
left.
going to tell you a lovely story, you know, never mind.
Well, I'm sure we'll give you a chance later.
Okay.
Yes, the Wild West starting now.
The Wild West is not nearly so wild as it used to be. Of course it is still.
Peter.
That's just what I said.
Yes, but he can repeat what you said, but he can't repeat what he said himself. That's...
Well, that's ridiculous. It's terribly boring. I mean, it wasn't very interesting when I said it.
I can assure you, it's difficult enough to remember what you say yourself in this game, but to try and remember what someone else has said as well.
Well, that's what he's done. He's obviously got a freakish memory.
Yeah. There are 31 seconds on the Wild West with you, Patrick, starting now.
Years ago, a long time before I was myself born, the West was indeed wild. There were red Indians marauding about the landscape, firing arrows...
Kenneth Williams.
Deviation isn't as well as maraudering.
Marauding, isn't it? That's right.
Precisely,
Yes, well done,
precisely.
Kenneth,
Thank
yes.
you. I'm glad to see you were quick on that.
I shall remember that.
That's good. Yeah.
There are 22 seconds left for the Wild West, Kenneth, with you starting now.
Howdy, partner. Howdy.
Amy.
Repetition.
Why?
He said howdy twice.
Yes, I think he did.
I said, how...
You were going to say it.
I did not. You weren't listening even, you see. I said, how are thee? And I was going on to say these things.
no.
Think on these things, I was actually going to say. Because I was going on to say, what are you doing in these parts?
Well,
And
all
I was
right.
gonna
We'll
say,
give you a
I've got
chance to
rotten
go on and
agent.
say...
That's what you're doing in these parts, you see.
Well, you're ruining it all for yourself because you're giving your material away because you...
Yes, sorry.
Yes, I'd keep it for the
He's
show.
better off without it, if you ask me.
Kenneth, you have 18 seconds left for the Wild West, starting now.
Well, you get your rodeos, and the cowboys come out with their pantaloons and the sideburns.
Peter Jones.
No decent cowboy would wear a pantaloon.
I don't know. He might be an indecent cowboy. I think he could wear what he wished. They don't normally wear them, I know, but he wasn't deviating strictly from the subject, so, Kenneth, you'll still have it, and there are 11 seconds left, starting now.
And the idea is to tame these broncos. They're called broncos.
And Patrick Moore.
Repetition of Broncos.
Yes, that's right, Patrick. 6 seconds are left for the Wild West, starting now.
Broncos did, of course, roam the Wild West a long time ago, but nowadays...
He said the Wild Left.
You just couldn't
It's
believe
short
it,
for
could you?
Wild Les, because Leicester is a famous character.
That is the old Red Indian name for it.
The old Red Indian name, everyone knows. Wild Les, you see.
It wasn't. It was a puffy Red Indian who called it that. But Aimi, I don't think Patrick would use phrases like that, so I agree with deviation. And you have 3 seconds on the Wild West, starting now.
There I was on this beautiful horse in a big western saddle.
Amy MacDonald once again succeeded in speaking as the whistle went, having got in just before, and she's keeping her lead. Our guest, Amy, is 2 ahead of Patrick Moore and Kenneth Williams, equal in second place. Kenneth, will you begin the next round? The subject is Daedalus, and you have 60 seconds on which to talk about it, starting now.
He was a curious creature, apparently Cretan legend has it, and...
Patrick Moore.
Deviation. He wasn't a creature, he was a man.
Well, man is a creature, and
Well,
I
in
think
some
that's...
cases, I would agree with you.
Yes, but it's a tough challenge when someone's only just started. So, in those
Well,
circumstances...
a man who was experienced and skillful as Kenneth.
Well, you're very kind.
Yes, that's right.
I think it was too harsh a
Okay.
challenge too soon, so I'm not going to allow it. And Kenneth has 55 seconds to continue with Daedalus, starting now.
Well, the thing we all remember about him was that he did fly over the archipelago and gave his son a pair of wings with which... I think this was the general idea.
Amy MacDonald, challenge.
That was a lot of hesitation. He's trying to think what to say next, isn't he?
No,
Yes.
I don't think so. I think he knows what to say next, but he hesitated. So
Yes, he did.
you have the subject, Amy, and 43 seconds on Daedalus, starting now.
I don't really know very much about Daedalus.
Patrick?
In that case, you shouldn't be talking about it.
She may not know much, but she can still try and talk, because that is the object of the game. So she got another point and increased her lead, and 40 seconds are left starting now.
But I'm sure he was a very brave, dashing young man. What?
Peter Jones.
He wasn't so young.
Well, he must have been young
Sometime,
once.
darling.
And he was,
Sometime everyone was.
yes, but he was a dashing young man at one time. I'm sure he was, and I'm sure Amy was right in saying so. There are 35 seconds left on Daedalus, Amy, starting now.
How many seconds?
35.
Oh.
Actually, Peter Jones.
Hesitation.
Yes, I agree. Peter Jones, you have the subject of Daedalus, and there are 33 seconds left, starting now.
Well, Daedalus virtually invented hang gliding. And he taught his son, but not well enough, and he perished, Icarus. And that was the end of him. He was a young man, whereas the father was, of course, older.
Kenneth,
Hesitation.
hesitation, I agree, yes. A good point to stop, actually. You made your point.
It wasn't really a hesitation, it was just a virtual standstill, I guess.
Which is equally culpable in this game. So, Kenneth, you have the subject, and there are 17 seconds left for Daedalus, starting now.
The Cretan legend says that his son flew too near the actual sun itself, S-U-N, you see, because I've already mentioned the fact that he was the issue from his loins, I can't say that. And it apparently melted the fasteners of his...
So Kenneth Williams got one of his favourite subjects back again, and having started with it, finished with it, got the point for speaking as the whistle went, and he has 11 points, and he's 2 behind Aimi MacDonald, who now is on the magical number of 13. Patrick is trailing a little behind Kenneth, and Peter Jones is trailing even more. Amy, we're round with you to start again, and the subject is outstanding things in my life. You have 60 seconds to tell us about some of those, starting now.
Outstanding things in my life, I would say one of them, it must be my beautiful daughter, who is about 5'6" and terribly intelligent.
She's not a challenge.
Well, I think it was a hesitation.
Yes, I think she was waiting for a round of applause at some She's got a belated one there, but we're delighted to know your daughter's so intelligent, but we can all understand it, actually, Amy.
Oh, thank you.
You hide it very well with your superb little girl act. And, Patrick, you have 49 seconds for the outstanding things in my life, starting now.
May I say at once, I do not for one moment doubt that Amy's daughter is extremely intelligent. This was not my intention.
Kenneth Williams.
Deviation.
Why?
Well, the subject is the most outstanding things in his life. Now he's discussing Aimi MacDonald.
I think that's a very good challenge, yes. So, Kenneth, you have the subject, and there are 43 and a half seconds, the outstanding things in my life, starting now.
The outstanding things in my life are headed, of course, by my extraordinary talent. And people have said, you are a cult. You will attract people because they will say, what a cult. He represents a great figure in the art world.
Reputation of cult.
Yeah. They do repeat the word rather a lot, don't they? It's already being one cult, but being two, I don't know. I think, no, that was repetition. So, Patrick, you have the subject back again, and there are 28 seconds. Outstanding things in my life, starting now.
I suppose, upon serious and very sober reflection, I may say that the greatest thing in my life, if it were in any way possible, which I agree is certainly not the case...
Kenneth Moore.
What deviations?
What did you say, Kenneth Moore? It's terrible. Where did he come from? The recesses of my fevered brain. I'm terribly sorry, Kenneth. Mind you, you do look as handsome as Kenneth Moore, Kenneth Williams. That was probably the reason. So what's your challenge, Mr. Williams?
Well, you see, the subject is the most outstanding thing, is it not?
Yes.
And he said the greatest thing. Now, we're not discussing the greatest, are we? We're discussing the most outstanding.
Oh, this is
Repetition of greatest.
Well, this is one of those sort of philosophical arguments which we
No,
so
it's
that's
up
your
to you
challenge.
to decide, and if you've got any intelligence, you should be able to do it.
I haven't, so I've got to put it to the audience. Your challenge is deviation, because you're talking about outstanding, and he was talking about some of the outstanding things in his life could be the greatest things in his life, so therefore he wasn't deviating. He keeps the subject. There are 18 seconds left, starting now.
The most outstanding thing in my life would certainly have been to become a cult. I realise that this is an extremely difficult thing to do these days, where people do not achieve this aim, except, of course, unless their name happens to be Kenneth Williams, when it can be extremely easy. This I appreciate. On the other hand, if I were myself setting out to achieve...
Well, there we are. Patrick Moore finished with a flourish there, and he's also brought the programme to a finish with a flourish, which you showed with your appreciation, your applause, because we have no more time, and there's just time for me to give you the final score. Peter Jones, returning from his triumphs of last year to just a minute, finished in 4th place. He gave his usual value, but he was thumping under the table a lot, which probably didn't help him win many points. Patrick Moore, returning from his triumphs, did extraordinarily well, including that final flourish we've just spoken about, and finished 1 point behind our joint winners, who were, on that number of 13, Kenneth Williams alongside Aimi MacDonald. What better pairing could we have?
Chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by David Hatch.
We present Kenneth Williams, Peter Jones, Clement Freud and Derek Nimmo in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome to Just a Minute. And as you've just heard, we have our 4 regular competitors of the game competing tonight, showing off their verbal dexterity and wit as they try and speak for just a minute, if they can, on a subject that I will give them, and they have to try and do it without hesitating, without repeating themselves or deviating from the subject. And we'll begin the show this week with the one and only Kenneth Williams. Kenneth, would you talk on the subject of getting started? Something very apt for just a minute, and will you try and do it in 60 seconds, starting now?
Getting started for me meant auditioning at the Victoria Theatre in Singapore. It was used during the day for the hearings of war crimes tribunals. A load of Japanese were dragged in there, and then, of course, we appeared at night to do these shows, rushing on with my impersonations of Suzette Tari and Winston Churchill, which went like a bomb. People said, "It is done as to the manner born." And I made famous the expression, "on the beaches, on the landing ground."
Peter Jones has challenged you.
Repetition.
Of what?
Well, during that Suzette Tarry impersonation, I think he repeated a sound.
A sound?
Yes.
Well, there's many sounds.
I mean, I couldn't distinguish the words.
No, well, of course, the thing is that it is only the words, and as I couldn't make it out either, we can't actually have a repetition of sounds, otherwise it would never get anywhere. So, Peter, I consider that's an incorrect challenge.
Very good judgment.
Yeah, when you're
winning.
on
On the ball tonight. No flies on him, is there, hey?
Whenever
nice.
You're winning, I'm doing well, and when it's the other way around, I am the worst chairman in the business, aren't I? Kenneth, you have a point for an incorrect challenge, you keep the subject. There are 15.5 seconds left, and you start now.
Getting started means rolling up my sleeves, getting out the dusters, and then shoving down the loo the disinfectant.
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Oh, I thought I'd like to get started as well.
What are you talking about? You would like to get started. It's not your go.
I haven't said anything yet.
No,
so
but
I
he'd
thought
like
I'd
to get started
have a
in your
little
go.
buzz and Get started.
Well, sorry, Derek, yes, obviously we'd like to hear from you. We have heard a lot of Kenneth, but I'm afraid it was an incorrect challenge.
Quite so.
So
yes.
he has another 8 seconds to getting started, starting now.
Getting started means the...
Derek Nimmo
Oh,
challenge.
sorry, that was a total mistake, and I'd withdraw my challenge immediately. I'm so sorry. I do beg your
Why
pardon,
don't you
Mr.
go
Williams.
away somewhere and get yourself an education, become literate or something? It's ludicrous. How can a
He's
person
only
like
just
myself...
flown in from
I've come all
Australia.
the way from Great Portland Street. I'm sitting here. I'm
Kenneth.
being treated like a load of rubbish.
You are not. You're being treated with great respect.
Do I
in the
look
audience
like a
lounge.
load of rubbish? Oh, thank you. That's nice. That is from the audience.
You must realise that Derek Nimmo has only just flown in on 30 hours
You
non-stop
keep
from
plucking the fact that
Australia.
he's flown in.
Well, he's
I've
got jet lag. He hasn't got into the game
He's
yet.
flown in. We all know that. He couldn't have flown out, could he?
Well, you'll be flying off in a minute if you're not careful. There are 7 seconds getting started, starting now.
I've been ruined in my peroration. How can I get underway? Every time I start,
Derek
some
Nimmo's
footling
challenge.
Well,
excuse
he's
is
not
made.
getting started because he's been ruined in his peroration.
That's right.
Where's my flow? Where's my flow? In my flow is
Listen,
gone.
you leave your women folk out of this and let's get on with the game. Derek, he was deviating from the subject, and there are 4 seconds now for you, having got a correct challenge and a point for that, to take over the subject of getting started, starting now.
I love getting started
and
with Kenneth Williams'
Clement
flag.
Freud has challenged you.
Deviation.
Why?
He has jet lag. He was much too quick.
Very
man
good
with jet
attempt,
lag.
Clement. I beg your pardon?
For a man with jet lag.
Yes, a
He
bonus
came in a
point
bit-
for Clement
a bit-
Freud
a
for a
bit
very good
sharpish.
try, which got nothing to do with the programme. But Derek
and-
Nimmo
and-
gets a point for an
and
incorrect
good
challenge. He
evening.
keeps the subject, and good evening. And we'll get on with the show. And there are 2.5 seconds left, Derek, with you, starting now.
I love getting started on the first. I'm very near New Year.
Well, when Ian Messiter blows his whistle, it tells us that 60 seconds is up, and whoever is speaking at that moment gets the extra point. On this occasion, it was Derek Nimmo who got in just before the whistle. So he has got now 3 points. He's equal in the lead with Kenneth Williams. Clement Freud has got 1, and Peter Jones has yet to score. But, Peter, your turn to begin. The subject, eating dirt cheap. Would you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
Well, that's just another of those rather corny restaurant jokes, like, waiter, is this egg fresh? I don't know, sir, I only laid the table. Do you serve crabs here? Sit down, we serve anybody. And there's a fly in my soup and so on, and getting dirt cheap.
Kenneth Williams.
I know.
Yes, but it wasn't enough to be a real hesitation. So Peter keeps the subject.
You say but it's not a hesitation. You want to wash your ears out, you great pig.
You want to wash your tongue out.
Chairman, disgraceful.
There are 40 seconds for you, Peter, with eating dirt cheap, starting now.
Well,
It's going to be one of those nights, isn't it? Derek Nimmo challenged you.
Well, one hardly dares to challenge with you in the chair. But you, repetition of and also hesitation.
That, I would say, was a definite hesitation.
Oh, you would.
Yeah, it
Yes,
was.
so you get the
That's a
subject and the
miracle,
point
isn't
for
it?
that.
Definitely.
And it's eating dirt cheap, and there are 38 seconds left, starting now.
Well, when I'm eating dirt cheap, I leap out into the rubbish dump and I start nibbling away at all the scraps and refuse that have been left behind by all the bin men, and I nibble and chew, and somehow it goes down inside my great gullet, and all the nasty worms and toads and grubs begin to ferment inside me, and then up...
Peter Jones has challenged, thank goodness.
It's much too far-fetched. But you can't... Worms don't ferment.
They might inside Derek Nimmo, but I quite agree. I won't.
No,
I
I
agree
mean,
with
otherwise you'd have worm wine.
you. Yeah.
There isn't such a thing.
No, Peter, I agree. He's deviated
Is
far
there?
too far.
Clement's nodding. He probably knows that there is. Can you get a worm wine-making kit?
There are 17 seconds left for you, Peter, on eating dirt cheap, starting now.
The important thing when opening a restaurant is to keep it incredibly
Derek Nimmo.
Repetition of restaurant.
He did say it before, you're right.
Oh.
There are 14 seconds eating dirt cheap. Derek, with you, starting now.
If you go to a place called the L'Opera, rather...
Clement Freud.
That was almost a hesitation.
It was definitely a hesitation. There are 11 seconds on eating dirt cheap with you, Clement, starting now.
I would say baked beans on toast for halfpenny is as good an example of eating dirt cheap as any I can think of, although toast, marmalade, and...
So Clement Freud was then speaking as the whistle went. He gained the extra point. He's now equal with Kenneth Williams, but Derek Nimmo has taken the lead. Derek, will you begin the next round? And the subject is the white shark. Will you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
The White Shark is a popular nickname for Nicholas Parsons. He's been known as the White Shark because of his meanness and also the fact that he tends to be very avaricious and steal things from people when they're not looking particularly points. Other times...
I'm going someone
I
Clement Freud.
burst in by then, annoyed.
That was another almost hesitation.
And it was deviation on every other single point, but nobody bothered to challenge. I agree with Clement, so you have 43 seconds on the white shark, starting now.
Well, this clearly refers to the manager of the local building society, because if ever there was a race of people who are white sharks, although some of them are brown, yellow, or even black sharks, they would certainly qualify to charge 12.5% interest on a home loan simply because whoever happens to be in government thinks that might be a fun figure for people to pay. I think it's so criminally dishonest that if I ever met the chap in the street, I would kick him if I didn't so terribly disapprove of people putting the boot...
Clement Freud, with his white shark, has taken himself into a stronger lead with gaining an extra point as the whistle went, and it is Clement Freud's turn to begin. The subject is Schooldays. Clement, can you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
School days happen before university days and even earlier than life. And I remember particularly about my school days that we had speeches at least once a year. Somebody came along and they always mentioned three things. One is things aren't what they used to be.
Derek Nimmo, challenge.
Repetition of things.
Yes, I'm afraid so, Clement. There are 41 seconds left for you, Derek. You take over the subject of school days, starting now.
I started school at the age of 4 in Cartmel Fell.
Clement Freud.
Deviation.
Why?
That was a school day.
It was one of the days.
One of the days.
Taking
An
one at
awful
a
lot
time.
more were going to come along afterwards. If you
A clever try, but I don't think it was justified. School days is still with you, Derek, starting now.
They do say that school days are the happiest days of your life. I think it's absolute rubbish. I didn't like it at all very much. And people didn't like me either. It was awfully sad. And I had a very unhappy time because people kept bullying me because they thought that I was inept, which I was, and I didn't get very good marks in any of my examinations that I remember. No, I could paint a little and I wasn't very good at games. In fact, people thoroughly disliked me.
Peter Jones, the challenge.
Repetition of people.
Yes, and there are 17 seconds left for school days with you, Peter, starting now.
Well, the days were only slightly less miserable than the nights, because at a boarding school it's usually cold. There are a lot of very noisy people in the dormitory, and the master who comes in and beats the daylights out of everybody just because he doesn't...
So Peter Jones was speaking when the whistle went, and he's moved forward into third place ahead of Kenneth Williams, and Derek Nimmo's taken the lead alongside Clement Freud. Kenneth, we're back with you. Would you take the subject of emperors and tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
Many names spring to mind. I would mention Hadrian and Marcus Aurelius. Perhaps Elagabalus is an interesting example. He arrived in Rome, you know, on a dray and had a lot of makeup on. The senators are reputed to have made representations and indignant noises about this, but he held full sway and filled every post far and wide. Gaul, Britain, Minorca, Majorca, all with posts with his favourite in charge. And I don't blame him, because, I mean, after all, if you've got a bit of authority, you might as well splash it about and say, well, have a good time. Only here for a short while. Might as well enjoy it while we can. And I think, when I look back on my own life, yes, Acton's dictum, all power corrupts, that is true.
Well, that's the first time in this series that somebody has started with the subject and kept going without hesitation, repetition or deviation and without being interrupted anywhere at all. So, Kenneth, you get a point for speaking as the whistle went, and the bonus point for managing to keep going for the full 60 seconds. And you're still in fourth place. No, actually, you're just ahead of Peter Jones, and Derek and Clement are still in the lead. Peter Jones, will you begin the next round, please? The subject, fixations. Will you tell us something about those in just a minute, starting now?
Well, it's one of those words like repressions and auto-suggestion, depressions that were popularized.
Derek Nimmo.
No.
Yes, I would agree. There's a definite
Well, I
earlier.
just stumbled for a moment, that's all. I didn't...
51 seconds on fixations with you, Derek, starting now.
Some people, like Kenneth Williams, have fixations about Roman emperors, and if you're not careful, they talk about them all day long. Particularly, he likes to talk about the Emperor Tiberius, because he used to have what were called his minnows.
Peter Jones has challenged.
Well, he said talk about twice.
Yes, he did. There are 41 seconds for Peter Jones on fixations, starting now.
Well, sometimes people get fixations about winning, and they feel it's terribly important to do so, whereas I feel that just merely playing the game as well as one can is more satisfying and very often more entertaining for those people who are watching, listening at home, or in the auditorium before us at this moment. Now, Clement and...
Derek Nimmo,
Sort of packed up altogether, really.
Well, I couldn't recall your name for a moment. I knew the face.
Derek Nimmo is sitting right beside Peter Jones for those at home, and I must say he was trying to inhibit him by staring very hard. There are 15 seconds on fixations with you, Derek, starting now.
I have a friend called Geoffrey Alcock, who has a fixation that in the previous existence he was the Dalai Lama, and he sits for hours at an end with a little prayer wheel beside him, reciting and chanting.
Peter Jones has challenged.
He sits for hours at an end. What does that mean?
I don't think it means very much.
Deviation.
Yeah.
Deviation from grammar and sense, yes. All right, well challenged, Peter. 4 seconds are left with fixations with you, starting now.
I'll tell you the most hair-raising fixation if I can be allowed a little more...
Really got one. He knew there was only 4 seconds, and he just kept going and achieved the object of speaking as the whistle went. So, Peter, you got a lot of points in that round. You've moved into second place to Clement Freud, just 2 behind Derek Nimmo. And, Derek, your turn to begin, and the subject is punch. If you'd like to put the daily paper down and join the show again. I know you've just come back from Australia, but there's nothing very much been happening that doesn't normally happen. The subject is punch. There are 60 seconds for you to talk about it, starting now.
I once fought 3 rounds with Henry Cooper, and I asked him how his punch was at that time, and he hit me on the jaw. It's absolutely true. And I went flat on my back, and it hurt very much. I was once in Las Vegas, and there I met Muhammad Ali, who I think probably has the greatest punch and the most impressive and exciting box of his generation.
Clement Freud, a challenge.
That really is nonsense. He hasn't got the greatest punch. He's got all sorts of other qualities, but not even... not even he would say he had the greatest punch. He hardly ever knocks anybody out.
I would incline to agree. Amongst the monks...
Isn't it a bit late in the day to complain that he's talking nonsense in this game?
Yes, that's a very good point, Peter. But
after about 18 years.
But he's regained the heavyweight champion of
yes,
the world
but I agree.
3 times.
All right.
He can't be just patting people, can he?
No, but I agree with what Clement Freud has said. It has been accepted by all the sporting journalists and the sporting authorities that Muhammad Ali, great as he is, has not got the greatest punch. He's one of the greatest boxers ever.
Well, these other people with better punches, why haven't they punched him?
Because he's so quick on his feet, and that's the point that Clement's making. I agree with his challenge, and you have 34 seconds for punch, Clement, starting now.
There's also a drink called punch, which is generally hot and made with a spirituous substance, either rum, brandy, whiskey, gin, or even a liqueur. Also sugar and spices like cinnamon, nutmeg, and clove, water, lemon, orange.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Repetition of all the same.
Oh, that's difficult.
Gosh, that went well, didn't it?
It did go very well. I don't truthfully remember whether he said also before. Occasionally I try to remember all the words.
Allspice, I think he said.
Yes, I think he said allspice.
No, but I will, if you like.
Yes.
Clement, you have 18 seconds to continue with Punch starting now.
If we go to the seaside, the sort of place where Derek Nimmo runs up and down the beach wearing a funny hat, we tend to see Punch and Judy shows which are marvellously and traditionally entertaining in that a small man, usually with a top hat, standing behind a curtain, makes noises.
Peter Jones.
The man doesn't wear a top hat, otherwise you'd see it.
No.
The man standing behind the curtain does not wear a top hat.
Well, mine does.
Oh. Well, then you said traditionally, so as you're going by tradition, I would say you're wrong. And Peter Jones has got in with 1 second to go on Punch starting now.
It's a great magazine.
We have an interesting situation at the end of that round because Peter Jones and Clement Freud have both got equal number of points in the round, and they've now come up alongside Derek Nimmo in the lead. So we had 3 leaders, all 3 of them ahead of Kenneth Williams. But you give us great
Wouldn't
value.
it be easy to say we have one loser?
No, because Kenneth is never a loser.
Ah.
He comes... Clement, your turn to begin. The subject is little-known facts about garden worms. There's an elaborate and delightful idea that Mest has thought of for you. Little-known facts about garden worms. Can you tell us any in 60 seconds, starting now?
It's very, very difficult to talk about little-known facts about garden worms because there are so many totally unknown facts about garden worms, but I will try. For instance, they tie each other in knots to keep damp. And they eat chocolate, especially eclairs and biscuits. And what is perhaps an incredibly little-known fact about garden worms is that they have a throughput of 9 tons of earth every 6 months, or 1.5.
Derek Nimmo's challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, after the 9 tons of earth going through them in 6 months, it does give pause for thought.
It was
doesn't
respectful pause for people
Yes.
to draw in their breath or draw out the throughput of earth.
Yes.
Or
Well, I think they digested it all right, but it was a definite pause, and Derek Nimmo, you take over the subject now. Little-known facts about garden worms, starting now.
One of the little-known facts about garden worms is that they greatly like Chanel No. 5. And if you...
Clement Freud.
that's an unknown fact. It is untrue.
Unknown to you, but it's known to me.
Untrue.
Little known.
I don't think it is a fact at all. And I give it back to Clement Freud with 22 seconds on the subject, starting now.
When they mate, which they do every now and
Peter Jones has challenged.
This is a family show. We don't want that sort of smutty talk.
Well, garden smut. Well done, Peter. Bonus for Peter. Clement keeps the subject for an incorrect challenge. 18 seconds left on the subject, starting now.
When worms are terribly fond of each other, they hardly ever write letters. They don't hold hands because they have none. But they go through a machinery known...
Peter Jones, a challenge.
Repetition of through.
Yes. All that soil went through them, if you remember, 6 months. And now you're sort of through again.
Very piddling little challenge.
I think it was a brilliant challenge. He had to remember it, and even more amazing that I've remembered it too. Because I got to remember every word. Little known fact.
Well, it was the graphic picture that he painted of all this soil going through one single worm that made me remember it.
Yes,
Well,
yes,
the
indeed.
throughput.
Well, obviously,
Yes.
you're
Throughput
living,
was
you're
the word
living
I
every
used.
moment of the materials.
The word I used was throughput, not through on its own.
Yes, you did, actually.
Yes, that's why I remembered it so much.
They said a throughput.
Throughput is not one word.
No, it's a hyphenated word.
No, but he used through earlier on.
He did, indeed, Peter. You have 6 seconds for little-known facts about garden worms, starting now.
If you treat a worm nicely, it can become a very good friend. And it can be house-trained and learn...
So So Peter Jones has taken the lead at the end of that round, gaining points on the way and the extra one as the whistle went. He's 1 ahead of Clement Freud, 2 ahead of Derek Nimmo, and more than half a dozen ahead of Kenneth Williams, who will begin the next round. Kenneth, the subject is Jockeys. Will you tell us something about them in just a minute, starting now?
They race down the course at Epsom and Ascot.
Clement Freud is challenged.
They don't. It's the horses.
It's a lovely challenge. Let's give it a point to Clement for that lovely challenge. But metaphorically speaking, I'm sure a lot of people say that jockey was racing because they race on the horses. So, Kenneth, keep the subject. You started with it, and you have 51 seconds left, starting now.
They have given their name to a most famous item of underwear, and everyone has reason to be deeply grateful for this incredible service. I have found...
Derek Nimmo is challenged.
Well, not everybody. Ladies don't have to be grateful.
Well, I think some ladies do wear jockey pants, don't they?
And others are grateful to people who wear them.
No, it's a good idea, but I don't think actually, no, he was deviating from the subject.
But I mean, sort of Hawaiian gentlemen aren't grateful for jockey pants because they don't wear it. What about all the Scottish listeners that we've got? I mean, they haven't got any jockey pants. Not everyone is grateful to them.
Sorry, the conversation's going the same way again.
The garden worms aren't grateful. Kenneth, you continue with the subject. There are 41 seconds left with jockeys, starting now.
A well-established fact for jockeys is they need to be light, which is why I am such a brilliant exponent of the art. When I appear, they cry, "Here he comes, Mr. Lightweight himself. Always welcome at Newmarket, Ken boy," they shout as I enter the arena, wearing the colours, of course, of my favourite employer. Will I name him? No, obviously, in a case like this, I better not, because I would be accused, would I not, of paying cheap publicity, and that is something I will never stoop to. No, I am a man of principle. You've only got to look at me and you say, "Here's a jockey with principle. He's never run a dirty race. He's never been wasted
Clement
up."
Freud is challenged. Sorry.
What was his challenge?
Two principles, but I take it back.
No,
Perhaps
you
they
had
were
it,
different
boy.
principles.
No, you had it, Clement boy. Good old Clement boy. No, go on, you have a go, love.
Well, Kenneth has very generously, he was really in full flow there, and I think he'd almost won the race, actually, in his imagination. But I'd love to see him on a horse. Clement, there are 2.5 seconds with jockeys starting now. Yes, Peter Jones.
Hesitation.
Yes. So it's neck and neck still between our two leaders. There are 1.5 seconds on jockeys with you, Peter, starting now.
They're not as nice as boxer shorts.
I've had a message. We have no more time, so let me wind up the show by telling you what the final score was. Kenneth Williams, after his triumphs of the previous weeks, returned to come in a solid 4th place. His jockey exploits didn't help him get into the lead here. He came behind Derek Nimmo, who finished in 3rd place, and Clement Freud was just in 2nd place, 1 point behind this week's winner, who was Peter Jones. You have enjoyed this edition of Just a Minute and will want to tune in again. And once again, we take to the air and we play this ridiculously delightful game. Until then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by David Hatch.
and Kenneth Williams, Peter Jones, Derek Nimmo and Joan Bakewell in just a minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Hello and welcome to Just a Minute. And as you've just heard from our announcer, we're delighted to welcome Joan Bakewell as our guest, who is going to try and pit her wits and her talent against our three regular competitors of the game. Each one of them will try and speak, if they can, for just a minute on the subject that I will give them without hesitating, without deviating from the subject or repeating anything. And we'll begin the show this week with Kenneth Williams, and the subject, Kenneth, is My Ideal. Can you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
My ideal would have been when I was a young Florrie Plume who wore 2 felt hats because she was frightened of any bombs dropping and thus causing her considerable injury. She taught me about the delights of kumquats and was led by her aunt all the way through Devon, only having one pause, which was on a bullock cart as they approached Dawlish. When she and I did come together, I conceived a passion, and I might say it might have been consummated had my parents been so disposed. But since I was only 11 and she was in service at the time over 25, there was no chance of us, so to speak, getting together. Therefore, I remained unfulfilled, thinking of this ideal only in the mind, never having this affection, love, you might say, requited.
Joan Bakewell has
Love
challenged.
deviation, I think, from
Yes.
idealism, don't you?
Oh, I thought you were going to have repetition. Deviation from his ideal. Well, I would have thought for Kenneth Williams to fall in love might have achieved his ideal. But, I think it's a very good challenge, and as he was getting very confused there, and as you are our guest, I do think the only fair thing I can do is give you a point for a correct challenge and say that you have 9 seconds to take over the subject as My Ideal, starting now.
It's very important when one conceives of an ideal person to make sure that one never has any opportunity of fulfilling any relationship with them. Otherwise...
When Ian Messiter blows his whistle, it tells us that 60 seconds is up, and that whoever is speaking at that moment gains an extra point. And on this occasion, it was our guest, Joan Bakewell. So at the end of the first round, she is the only one to have scored. And Derek Nimmo, would you take the next round? The subject is Conkers. Will you tell us something about those in just a minute, starting now?
How I'd like to stand in the autumn of the year beneath a spreading chestnut tree and throw up into it stones and branches to try and bring down to the ground these lovely little nut kernels, the conkers, which I will then put onto a piece of string and go around and find chums who have similar things on the end of pieces of rope and bang away at their conkers. And if you succeed, well, in fact, if you conquer, using the other sense of the word, then you tie a little knot on this piece of that you...
Peter Jones.
Hesitation.
Yes, hesitation, searching for another description for the word string. Peter, you get a point for a correct challenge, and you take over the subject, and there are 32 seconds left. Conkers, starting now.
Yes, as Derek said, it is the fruit of the horse chestnut, and I suppose...
Kenneth Williams.
Repetition, as Derek has just said.
But Peter Jones hadn't said it. So it's only if he repeats it. You see, Peter hadn't repeated it.
I see. You're making these rules up as you go along.
They haven't altered, actually. Peter, an incorrect challenge. You still have Conkers, and you have 27 seconds, starting now.
And before the age of television, and even many years ahead of the invention of numerous toys that children have now...
Joan Bakewell.
Nothing to do with Conkers at all, this. This is all about the future of
Absolutely
television.
right. You're absolutely well
No, I said
terrible. She's very good, isn't she?
I said before the
Thank
invention
you.
of these things.
Yeah.
Conkers, I was about to say.
Yeah, but you didn't get there quick enough. And I think Joan has a correct challenge, and there are 20 seconds left on Conkers, Joan, starting now.
The best way to prepare a conker for a match, such as Derek has referred to, is to take the fruit and put it in the oven at a very low heat and leave it there for some 3 or 4 hours. If the conker is heated to...
Peter Jones has challenged.
I think 3 or 4 hours is much too long.
I was just about to explain why. It was the right
what is
time.
your challenge?
Well, just spinning it out too long.
Give him a point.
Half an hour at least, you know, that's the most...
There must be deviation for which I disagree, because you can put your conker in the oven for as long as you want. There are 6 seconds left for you, Joan, having got an incorrect challenge to continue on Conkers, starting now.
After this time...
Kenneth Williams.
Hesitation.
I'm afraid so, Joan. That's what happens in this game, because 1.5 seconds went.
He's sitting next to me being so kind and smiling.
Yes. Don't be deceived. He was just giving you encouragement to get you started. But now...
now it's his turn.
The true side is coming out. There are 5 seconds left on Conkers with you, Kenneth, starting now.
This was an appellation applied to myself. They cried out, "Oh, he's a conker, if ever I saw one." My turn to talk.
Kenneth
I
Williams.
was finishing then, so I get a point, don't I?
Yes. For
that means I'm in the lead, right?
No. You're in second place behind our guest Joan Bakewell.
Oh.
And equal with Peter Jones.
Oh, dear.
And Derek Nimmo's in last place. Peter, will you begin the next round? The subject is sampans. Will you tell us something about those in just a minute, starting now?
One of the most exciting scenes in the world is the water market at Bangkok, where these sampans are floating about, loaded with bananas and curry and various fruits and vegetables, and they're all jockeying for position, and some of the people are fishing from them, and others swimming in the liquid around them. Now, I was called at 9 o'clock in the morning. I dashed down and I got into the motor launch and I scudded through these crowds of excited...
Derek Nimmo, challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, I agree, Derek. 26 seconds are left for sampans with you, Derek, starting now.
How I love to leave the scented harbour of Hong Kong in a sampan and go out to Chung Chau or Lantau or Llama Island, paddled by a dear old lady at the back, one of the hacker women perhaps with a big hat with a black around the side of it. And as we go, she hands to me a beautiful piece of pigeon meat cut up and wrapped in a lettuce leaf. And I think this is as near to heaven as one can possibly have.
Peter Jones.
It may be near to heaven, but it was a long way from the sampan.
I agree with your deviation. He was on about the pigeon meat and not the sampan. There are 3 seconds left on sampans, Peter, starting now.
You can make your own sampan if you get enough wood and...
So at the end of that round, Peter Jones, speaking as the whistle went, got another point, and he is now in the lead alongside Joan Bakewell. And Joan, your turn to begin, and the subject is rabbits. Can you tell us something about them in this game, starting now?
Richard Adams' book, Watership Down, teaches us that rabbits are very similar to human beings in the way that they speak, think, and act. Though when I had my own...
Derek Nimmo, challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, I think
Absolutely,
you're
you're so right.
No, it was rather me. I'm sorry, I'm very rude.
Well, I hope she gets back at you.
Yes,
She's
will, yes.
never played the game before. But it was a correct challenge, so I give it to you, Derek. And there are 47 seconds on rabbits, starting now.
The family Austin were the first people to introduce rabbits into Australia. They live at Bolac, which is down in Western District. They were first transported out to Van Diemen's Land in about 1840.
Joan Bakewell.
The rabbits or the people?
The people.
Oh, well, change of subject, then.
Yes,
Deviation.
They had to get there to get the rabbits sent out to them, didn't they, really?
Yes,
rabbits
but,
are indigenous
as
to
you were
Australia.
tough with her, I'm going to be tough with you
absolutely.
now
Quite
and
right.
give it back to Joan. And Joan, you have 36 seconds on rabbits, starting now.
I realised that
It is difficult. Derek.
It's impossible.
She realised that she hesitated.
Yes, 34 seconds are left for rabbits with you, Derek, starting now.
Every time it gets to the first of the month, I say rabbits. Leap out of bed and rush around because I know this will bring me good luck. When one used to be away at boarding school, one used to do quite different things and kiss the first person that one saw coming down the staircase. That I no longer do. I just say rabbits, because it does seem to be a totally satisfying thing to do. Particularly if you have a rabbit's foot in your pocket, it will give you even greater good fortune. Now, I was going to tell you about rabbits' in the Antipodes.
Peter Jones has challenged.
Hesitation.
Yes.
Yes. 7 seconds on rabbits with you, Peter, starting now.
Yes, well, they were introduced to Australia, but as you know, there are a lot of very good tennis players there. Some of the ones who don't
Derek
play...
Nimmo challenge.
Well, he's now talking about tennis players.
Yes, but some tennis players are referred to as rabbits when they're beginners, and that's
Yes.
what he was saying, or about to say.
No.
And so there is 1 second left on rabbits, still with you, Peter, starting now.
Quite right, Nicholas.
So Peter Jones was again speaking as the whistle went, and his information about rabbits has kept him in the lead, and now ahead of Joan Bakewell. Kenneth Williams and Derek Nimmo are equal in third place, and Kenneth, we're back with you to start. The subject that Ian Messiter has brought along for you is Thomas Sidney Cooper, the painter. We make that clear because obviously we've got to talk about him and not some other Thomas Sidney Cooper. And there are 60 seconds starting now.
Well, he was famous apparently for drawing animals and painted coaches originally for a living, and then eventually graduated to becoming drawing master. And during the course of his life there occurred this trip he had to Belgium and Holland, the Low Countries, as some would have it. And while there, had considerable difficulty sketching this horse. He said, for goodness sake, to the ostler, keep it still. And the other one cried out, she's a Flemish mare. And they are a very, fiery-tempered beast, these splendid...
Derek Nimmo challenged.
Hesitation, sort of running out, wasn't it?
Yes. 19 seconds on Thomas Sidney Cooper, the painter. Derek, starting now.
Anybody who's visited Canterbury will have seen the Thomas Sidney Cooper Museum, which is filled with the most wonderful works of art and gives great delight and joy to anyone who visits that fair city.
Kenneth Williams.
He's not discussing the man Cooper, he's talking about an exhibition at Canterbury.
Which was named after Thomas Sidney Cooper.
Canterbury was named after Thomas.
No.
What an idiot.
I don't think he was deviating from the subject. He had connected the two with the museum in Canterbury, but I like your response.
Right.
There are 10 seconds, Derek, with the subject starting now.
He was indeed famed for painting cows and sheep, particularly the udders of the aforementioned beast, and he gave them a most wonderfully delicate touch. And with sheep, he could do the most beautiful things.
Peter Jones has challenged.
Repetition of sheep.
Yes, he did too many sheep for your Just a Minute contest. Oh, and only half a second left. How clever you are, Peter. And starting now. Stubbs. Peter Jones, needless to say, has increased his lead at the end of that round. Derek Nimmo's moved into second place. He's just one ahead of Joan Bakewell and Kenneth Williams, who are equal in third place. Peter, your turn to begin, and the subject is simply pleasure. So can you tell us something about pleasure in Just a Minute, starting now?
Well, pleasure is very rarely unalloyed. And Lord Chesterfield wrote about pleasure at great length and very frequently, as far as I can remember, from his letters to his son, though unfortunately I'm not able to recall any single thing that he said. What a pity, because it would have padded out this little chat about pleasure quite...
Derek Nimmo challenged.
Well, because I know what Lord Chesterfield said. I thought it might be quite helpful, really, that's all.
Yes, well, if you could have slipped it to me unobtrusively, it would have been all right.
So your challenge was deviation, and as he wasn't deviating from the subject, it's a wrong challenge, and Peter keeps it, and there are 37 seconds left, starting now.
Pleasure can be a reward, something that comes at the end of a great effort, when one has made some particular...
Derek Nimmo challenge. Yes, definitely. Yes. He thought about pleasure and he dried up.
Yes.
Very significant. 27 seconds are left for pleasure with you, Derek, starting
Talking
now.
about pleasure, Lord Chesterfield said, a man of fashion is never heard to laugh, but only seen to smile, which I think is one of the things that always carries me.
Peter Jones has challenged.
Well, that's got nothing to do with pleasure. He did talk about pleasure, and Lord Chesterfield did write about pleasure, but that's about manners and laughing.
But I got the impression that he must have been expressing his feelings about something pleasurable.
No, he wasn't. His son.
I don't think you'd smile about unpleasurable things, so I don't think actually Derek was deviating. Good try, Peter. And a very difficult decision for me to make, but I will come down on Derek's side and say he has 18 seconds to continue on pleasure starting now.
My own conception of pleasure is to be wandering along a deserted beach looking for conch shells, which I particularly like and collect most avidly. I have a little pink bucket which I put them in, together with some seaweed and the occasional shrimp. That, to me, is the height of pleasure as far as I am concerned. As I continue along...
Derek Nimmo was speaking then as the whistle went. He gained that all-important extra point. He's moved forward only 1 point behind our leader, who's still Peter Jones. Joan Bakewell and Kenneth Williams are trailing a little now, and Joan is going to begin the next round. The subject is springs. Can you tell us something about those in just a minute, starting now?
In the summer of 1976, we had the good fortune...
Derek Nimmo challenge.
She's talking about the summer rather than spring. Deviation.
The summer of 1976 must have followed a spring, so you didn't give her a chance to
followed the spring of 1976, actually.
Be generous, I'm sorry.
Peter, that's incredible. How did you work that out? Good Lord, I'm glad you came along. We would never have realised that. Joan, it was an incorrect challenge. You only went for 3.5 seconds. You still had the subject. You got an extra point, of course, for a wrong challenge, and there are 51.5 seconds left on springs starting now.
We stayed in a hotel that was built on a point of land where a number of springs came together, and this made a tremendous difference to the aspect of the garden. Whereas the rest of the landscape surrounding the hotel was arid and rocky, the garden, which was watered by the springs, was full of colourful flowers and grass and weeds, and was a most beautiful sight as the hotel residents gathered in
Well, we did have 3 hotels, I'm afraid.
I know.
It's a very large one.
3 hotels.
Not at all, no. I was just wondering how long you were going to be able to keep going without collapsing, Joan. Well, there are 34 seconds left for springs with you, Kenneth, starting now.
Well, on the subject of pleasure, Dr. Johnson said...
He's talking about the previous subject.
I know, you've just woken up.
He said springs, you see. He said about springs. I was going on to quote the mention of springs. He said...
But you said on the subject
of pleasure.
Hope springs eternal. What are you talking about?
I think you should have it, Kenneth. Very artfully done, I think, at the same time. There are 31 seconds left for springs with you starting now.
Well, if you can't get it in another place, you've got to try to get it somewhere else. And I was...
Derek Nimmo challenge.
In Mr. Peter James' usual words, this is a family show.
It used to be your battle cry in just a minute. It was a family show.
Well, either I'm very naive or a complete fool.
I don't think you're either.
Thank you. I'm not conscious of having said anything which would give offence.
No, you look a bit unconscious at the moment. But I don't think you were deviating from the subject of springs, even though you were lowering the tone of the family show.
What has it got to getting it in got to do with springs?
Well, they go up and down, so you've got to get it in. Presumably.
Exactly.
Yes. There are 24 seconds, Kenneth, on springs, starting now.
One of the most difficult things when it comes to upholstery is to get the cloth over the springs. Now, you can get it in at a certain angle.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
He's got it in twice.
Yes. So, Derek, will you try and get him out of it? And there are 15 seconds on springs starting now.
I went on my honeymoon to the south of France, and there I had a very springy bed, and somebody had tied beneath it a large bell, and you've no idea the laughter that ensued as the evening went on, and Joan the Pan. We had to move the next night.
Joan Bakewell challenge.
A family show challenge.
Yes, I know.
We were married.
Bells and Joan the Pan.
Very little intimate.
Yes, but I still... anyway, well tried, Joan, but actually he wasn't deviating from springs, so he has another second to continue starting now. Springs... who challenged? Oh. So Derek Nimmo has now taken the lead. He's just ahead of Peter Jones, who's just ahead of Kenneth Williams, who's just ahead of Joan Bakewell. And Kenneth Williams, your turn to begin. Ships that pass in the night. Will you tell us something about those in just a minute, starting now?
The most vivid illustration that springs to my mind, apropos ships that pass in the night, occurs where the incident of the California actually did pass the Titanic. Now, at the time, in distress, she was sending up these Veery lights, or whatever they're called, and the other man thought, oh, they're having a firework display. And that is the reason, he said afterwards at the trial, or inquest, or whatever you call the proceedings which were incurred after that terrible wreck that it did happen. I mean, the iceberg did hit. I mean, or it came into contact.
Joan Bakewell is challenged.
There's a confusion of
I think deviation of everything, yes.
It passed in the night, the California passed the Titanic.
Kenneth, I believe you.
It was the most extraordinary occurrence, because they were setting up these very lights, and he said, oh, my grand father. The most extraordinary thing.
Yes.
I always think about it when I think of the Titanic, because, you know, the man said on board, waiter, I know I ordered ice, but this is ridiculous.
So, thank you for the good value, Kenneth, but you were deviating onto icebergs and other things. So, Joan, you have a correct challenge, and there are 21 seconds for ships that pass in the night starting now.
The danger of the increase of traffic in the channel at the moment is that ships will not indeed be
You rotten thing, yes.
Fish and chips.
Yes. Too many ships in the channel there.
Slight mishap in pronunciation. I mean, where's your gallantry? You've got a guest on the show, a lady. Haven't you got any politeness? Where's your manners, for goodness sake?
And that's the man who says we shouldn't have women on the show.
Of course. Well, I mean, I usually do, but with her it's different. After all, she's a professional, isn't she?
Yeah. Steady on, I thought it was a family show. Kenneth, Joan Bakewell was one of the loveliest guests we've had, but, and I agree about the gallantry, but it was a correct challenge, so he goes over to Derek with 17 seconds left, starting now.
Ships that pass in the night and speak each other in parting, those immortal words of Longfellow have now passed into the language through that lovely poem. One thinks about the ships that come from...
Kenneth Williams.
What lovely poem?
Longfellow's Wayside Tales.
Oh, tell us about it, then. You can't just...
He doesn't have to. He's not obliged to tell you.
Well, I mean, I don't know.
It
He says it's coming to our language through his lovely poem. Well, what is this language that we're all speaking?
He's not obliged to tell you any poems or anything at all, as long as he keeps going and doesn't...
Well, I want to know.
Well,
that with the blind.
You might take him a little corner afterwards and tell you.
He says it's coming to our language through Longfellow. Well, what is it?
Well, I told you, the Wayside Inn is the...
Derek, you have 6 seconds to continue with the subject of ships that pass in the night, starting now.
Dirty British coaster with a salt cake smokestack.
Kenneth Williams.
Well, this has nothing to do with Longfellow.
I know
He's now
it isn't,
in the
but
middle of quite another poet.
He can move on to Macefield if he wants to afterwards. It doesn't really matter. He can go on to whatever he likes.
Well, I think this is very off-putting. Here we are, 1 minute being told that Longfellow's written something that passes into our language, which he fails completely, but is one example of. And then he quickly, hastily, I noticed, went on to another poet entirely.
Yes, but you can put each other off as much as you like.
I think it's deviation. I don't think
you're
he knows
putting us off right now and holding us up. And there are 3 seconds for Derek to continue on ships that pass in the night, starting now.
Only a signal shown, a distant voice in the darkness of the line that succeeds the line that I told you about.
So, with those incorrect challenges from Kenneth Williams to Derek Nimmo, and also 1 extra point for speaking as the whistle went, Derek has increased his lead. And, Derek, it's your turn to begin. The next round is Spot the Lady. So can you tell us something about her in just a minute, starting now?
Well, it's tolerably easy to do on the programme tonight because, of course, there's only one lovely lady amongst us. Another way, I suppose, of spotting the lady might be to give her an injection of measles, because then she would soon be covered with very nasty spotty spots, which would not be at all pleasant. Another way could be to throw ink at a woman, and then she would be covered with blue spots. To spot the lady, I think, also refers to a card game, but I'm not entirely sure about it. I think I used to call it in my childhood Ginny Greenteeth, but I think it's much the same sort of arrangement, where you deal a pack of these mentioned lovely sheets of paper with stars and clubs and diamonds. Nobody wants to talk about Spot the Lady but me, because nobody knows anything at all about it.
Repetition of nobody.
Yeah, indeed, yes, and a lot of other things, I'm sure. 15 seconds are left with you, Peter, on Spot the Lady, starting now.
Well, it's really a confidence trick, and I've seen it practiced in Oxford Street. And they have one man who's dealing the cards, and he has two accomplices. One of them is putting the money on and trying to egg foreigners, visitors, tourists.
Just a minute, no, Derek challenged with half a second ago. What was your challenge,
Well, I
Derek?
think that's called Chase the Ace, not Spot the Lady.
It depends on who's playing it.
Well,
What I'm talking about was Spot the Lady.
Yeah, so Derek, Peter has another point with half a second to go, starting now.
Trump.
I'm afraid we have no more time to play Just a Minute, and Peter Jones with that last flash didn't quite catch up on our leader. But let me give you the final score in reverse order. Joan Bakewell, our guest, who's never played the game before, came and did so well, and she's got only 1 point less than Kenneth Williams. So let's have a round of applause, because it's a very difficult game. For Joan Bakewell. I hope that you'll be free to come back in a few weeks' time and play it again, Joan.
I've got the confidence.
Oh, that's what it's all about, and you did marvellously. Kenneth Williams just beat you 1 point ahead. Peter Jones was a few points further ahead, and in the lead, 3 points ahead of Peter, was our winner this week, Derek Nimmo. We hope you have enjoyed this edition of Just a Minute. From all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by David Hatch.
We present Kenneth Williams, Peter Jones, Clement Freud, and Derek Nimmo in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome to Just a Minute. And as you've just heard, we have our 4 regular competitors of the game. And as usual, I'm going to ask them if they can speak for just a minute on the subject that I will give them, and if they can do it without hesitation, without repetition, or without deviating from the subject. And we'll begin the show this week with Kenneth Williams. Kenneth, the subject is excitement. Something that you generate a great deal of, and now will you talk about in just a minute, starting now.
The greatest excitement was surely generated when Blondin crossed Niagara Falls and on a second attempt did it blindfolded, then with a man on his shoulders, and later with stilts. Surely the breathless people watching, agape, amazed, were excited beyond any ordinary performer's vibrations or whatever it is you would give off in causing that kind of excitement. I mean, I'm at a loss even to describe the kind of thrill, the frisson.
Derek Nimmo has challenged.
Deviation is not at a loss, is he?
Yes, what a difficult challenge. Yes, he's not at a loss to describe it, because normally he would be at a loss, but he has to keep going in just a minute, so therefore he has to overcome those difficulties. Therefore, I would say he was not deviating from the subject of excitement. In fact, he was demonstrating it admirably. And Kenneth, a wrong challenge. You get a point for that, of course, and there are 23 seconds left. Excitement starting now.
Great excitement, of course, is always generated.
Clement Freud.
Of course, repetition of.
Yes, you did say, of course, before, I'm afraid. Clement Freud, you have a point for a correct challenge and 20 seconds on excitement starting now.
Of course, what excites me more than almost anything else is sitting next to Kenneth Williams and feeling him throb. he actually vibrates, and his jacket goes in and out, up and down, through and along, away and asunder, and it is a tremendous joy for me to have this fine actor.
When Ian Messiter blows his whistle, it tells us that 60 seconds is up, and whoever's speaking at that moment gets the extra point. It was Clement Freud, who's in the lead, of course, at the end of that round. Derek Nimmo, will you begin the next round? And the subject is operating a gondola, starting now.
Well, I haven't actually operated a gondola, but I have...
Peter Jones, a challenge.
Hesitation.
I would definitely agree, Peter. There are 55.5 seconds for operating a gondola with you starting now.
Well, if you're thinking of taking up the operation of a gondola, my advice is don't do it in Venice, because there are far too many there already. The best place to attempt this venture would probably be Crewe or some other place where they don't have much glamour or anything of any great interest.
Derek Nimmo challenged.
Well, they haven't got much water in it.
Peter, I don't think you were, strictly speaking, deviating from the subject on the card, so you continue, having got an extra point. A point for a wrong challenge, and there are 36 seconds left, starting now.
Perhaps the Thames would be a good place to start it, because one could go across.
Derek Nimmo.
Well, to operate a gondola, you've got to stick a pole in, haven't you? Wouldn't it be rather
No,
long
you
way
haven't.
down?
It's an oar. You
Oh,
don't
is it?
stick a... It's a
Oh,
punt.
you stick your oar in, do you?
That's right. No, it's the oaring. I'm sorry, this is very good on radio, all this demonstration that I'm giving. No, a wrong challenge, I'm afraid, Derek. 32 seconds are left, Peter, operating a gondola starting now.
You could get...
Freud.
Hesitation.
Yes, that's what happens when you're interrupted twice running so rapidly. 31 seconds are left for you on operating a gondola, Clement, starting now.
I think there's nothing more exciting or memorable than watching a Venetian gondolier operating his boat or gondola, because it's on the card, I can say it again. They travel at enormous speed with such skill and dexterity.
Peter Jones challenge.
Well, they don't travel at enormous speed.
They do, actually, yes.
I think they travel at enormous speed for a boat, but not at enormous speed.
Well, not for Concord, I mean.
No. That's one of those things, it's very difficult to judge. So when I have an impossible judgment to make, I always put it to the superior wisdom of our very intelligent-looking audience. So will you judge, and if you agree with the challenge that they don't operate at speed, then you cheer for Peter Jones. Enormous speed, yes. And if you think that they do operate at enormous speed, then you boo for Clement Freud, but you all do it together now. Boo. All think gondolas operate at enormous speed. They're obviously speaking from experience. All their wet feet, they just come from Venice. Clement, you have the decision of the audience. You get a point, and the subject still 17 seconds, starting now.
Most gondoliers look extraordinarily like Derek Nimmo.
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Repetition of gondoliers.
That is right, Derek. He said it before. 15 seconds are left with you, starting now.
In Kashmir, they have a boat called a shakira, which looks very like a gondola. And it's operated much the same way. A man is with an oar in the back of the boat and rows along very gently through these lovely lotus-ridden lakes beneath the gardens of Shalimar. To me, this is the most heavenly and perfect way of being transported.
Derek Nimmo was speaking as the whistle went. He gained that extra point, but he's in third place, just behind Peter Jones and Clement Freud in the lead. And Peter Jones, your turn to begin. The subject is Thebes. Will you tell us something about it in just a minute, starting now?
The ancient Greek...
Hesitation, the ancient Greek.
The ancient yes, what a pity. There are 58 seconds on Thebes with you, Derek Nimmo, starting now.
Oedipus Rex, telling of the great story of the famine in Thebes. I went to see the lovely theatre at Epidaurus last summer, and sitting in this 14,000 capacity amphitheatre, one saw the great Sophocles drama unfold in front of one. The ancient Thebians wandering amidst the...
Peter Jones's challenge.
A repetition of ancient.
Yes, that is right. Well, listen, Peter, 41 seconds are left for the subject of Thebes, starting now.
The citizens of ancient Thebes were being eaten by the Sphinx, and it was only when Oedipus guessed the...
Clement Freud.
Repetition of Oedipus.
That is right. Yes, I'm afraid so.
But that was the time before when I mentioned Oedipus.
Ah, but you mustn't mention it twice. Somebody else can mention it, but you mustn't mention it.
I know, but they wouldn't have known who I was. Listeners switching on in the middle. they wouldn't know what I was talking about.
What about the few who'd switched off after the first effort? No, I'm afraid,
I can't
Peter,
account for them.
No, but I have to try and listen, and you said it before, and Clement picked it up. There are 32.5 seconds on Thebes, Clement, starting now.
Thebes was where Luxor is now, which is down the Nile and along a bit.
Peter Jones's challenge.
Actually, it's up the Nile.
Do you go up the Nile or down the Nile?
Well, it's between Aswan and Cairo, and therefore, as I haven't nominated where I was looking from.
No, it's one of those things, what's up and what's down.
Yeah, but from the Paris Regent Street, it's up.
He still hasn't nominated it. I think it's one of those things that we haven't established anything, so we won't charge any points for or against. And say that
come on.
No.
Well, then
Clement,
I won't go on talking.
You keep this.
No, he can have the subject. I'm not going to get a point too much.
Keep the subject.
Wasn't very good challenge.
No.
Kenneth will take the subject.
You have, are you giving it to Kenneth on Thebes? All right, there are 26 seconds for you, Kenneth, on Thebes, starting now.
Well, of course, it was the home, was it not, of Tutankhamun. And he came over here for the British exhibition. I believe it was at the museum.
Peter James's challenge.
Tutankhamun never came over here.
Never came over here.
What came over here, then?
His mummy. His mummy.
What?
His mummy.
Well, isn't that him?
No, not his mummy or his daddy. His mummy.
You can't have his mummy if he ain't in it, can you?
No. The way you were speaking, we felt he had come over. It was a very good challenge of Peter's. Peter, I agree with your challenge. You have 15 seconds on Thebes, starting now.
Get your gondola and take a trip up the Nile.
Kenneth, a challenge.
Well, I mean, it's deviation. There are simply no gondolas on the Nile. That is an established fact. Steamboats there may be. There may be a few dhows. Quite a few dhows, in fact. I've seen more dhows than you've had hot dinners.
Repetition of dhows.
Repetition of dhows. No, he was suggesting that you take your gondola, and he was going to go up or down the Nile to see Thebes. There are 12.5 seconds on Thebes, Peter, with you starting now.
Well, you can swim up the Nile as far as I'm concerned, but at any rate, go there.
Derek Nimmo's
Repetition of Nile.
Yes, he's been up the Nile too much. 8 seconds are left on Thebes with you, Derek, starting now.
And so when Jocasta learned, in fact, that she was the mother of her husband, she killed herself, and the king of Thebes...
Well, Peter Jones and Derek Nimmo and Clement Freud all got points in that round. Peter and Clement are equal in the lead, 1 point ahead of Derek Nimmo, and Kenneth Williams is trailing a little. Clement, would you begin the next round? The subject is the most exacting dish to cook. Can you tell us something from your culinary experience about that, starting now?
I suppose one of the most exacting dishes to cook would be a shepherd's pie using a real, live man who looks after sheep. And inspired by this, I tried the other day to order cabinet pudding in the House of Commons restaurant, and unfortunately found it to contain absolutely none of the people for whom I don't much care. Quenelle of sole Nantua is a pretty exacting dish to cook, because you need the raw fish and a hair sieve and a stone or palette or utensil of some kind with which you press the one through the other. You do it over ice and add the whites of eggs and double cream, and then poach the resultant mass in a liquor containing white wine, onion, shallot, thyme, bay leaves, marjoram. Oh, come on, blow that whistle.
I'm sorry. Oh, come on, and Peter Jones challenged?
Hesitation.
Yes, and deviation. Oh, come on. And you only had 2 more seconds
It's so
to keep going.
boring, it's really.
I was fascinated. I want to rush home and do it. Cook the meals, you see. Half a second to go on the most exacting dish to cook, Peter, with you starting now.
When I'm...
Clement Freud challenged with 1/4 of a second to go.
Hesitation, I thought.
No, I don't think it was quite hesitation. No. So you still have quarter of a second, Peter, to try and tell us about the most exacting dish to cook.
Yes, well,
starting
cooking
now.
the books is probably the
Now you
most...
do. So with a little help from Clement Freud there, Peter Jones increased his lead at the end of that round. Kenneth, we're back with you, and would you tell us something about Salome, the dancer, starting now?
She was the daughter of Herodias, and at her mother's instigation, she did the dance of the 7 veils. Each one was supposed to represent a day of the week. On Monday, of course, it was early closing, so she never got it really finished in time. She is not a lady who enjoys much prestige in the world. People rather tend to look down on her. She was a disgusting creature when you really come right down to... I suppose I said down twice, but none of you have recognised
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Well, he said down 3 times.
Yeah. Kenneth, you want to keep going, they sometimes don't notice it. Derek, you have the subject of Salome, the dancer, and there are 33 seconds left, starting
This
now.
divine creature immortalized by Oscar Wilde. Having completed a dance, she then, at her mother's instigation, was given a choice of a gift.
Kenneth Williams.
Repetition, I've already said it. Her mother's instigation. Those were my exact words.
Yeah,
He's
but-
repeated my phrase. He's taken the words out of my mouth. He doesn't know where they've been.
But he's allowed to repeat the words that you say, but he mustn't repeat any words that he says.
Oh, you're making these rules as you go along. He's not allowed to do something else.
They've been the rules ever since the show first started. And you've been in it since it first started. And you don't look a day older either. Derek, a wrong challenge. So you keep the subject. There are 23 seconds on Salome the dancer, starting now.
Salome the dancer worked on the pier at Clacton-on-Sea. It was a lovely little act that was brought over from Belgium, especially for the summer season of '64. She also waggled her great enormous belly, and I sit her on a deck chair and cheered with all the other people every time lovely Salome came on and showed her stately side.
So Derek Nimmo kept going with great panache on Salome and got the point for speaking as the whistle went. He's now 1 point behind our leader, who's still Peter Jones. Clement Freud's a little behind him, and Kenneth is still trailing a lot. Derek, it's your turn to begin. The subject is Fiji. Will you tell us something about Fiji in just a minute, starting now?
Quite my favourite of all the South Pacific islands, a land filled with waving palms and rocky, craggy mountains, and, of course, the Fijian people themselves. Most of the population are Indian, but half of them are of native Fiji stock. And when I was last here... Oh, bless you.
Clement Freud is jump. What was your deviation?
Well, if most of them are one thing, half of them can't be the other.
Yeah, very good challenge, yes. And that Fijian erupted in the audience at that moment. And, Clement, you have a correct challenge, and there are 42 seconds on Fiji, starting now.
One of the slightly off-putting things about Fiji is that it's very near the international date line. And when you go there, you're never quite sure whether it's Tuesday or Wednesday, or they've got it wrong and it was Friday afternoon. When the Fijians came over here to play rugby football, many of us found them to be one of the most entertaining, attacking rugby sides we'd ever come across. Rugby football has a hyphen. Rugby is written on its own.
No, not a hyphen.
No,
Yes.
rugby
No, rugby football is
football.
not a hyphen.
Rugby
Trying
football.
to justify yourself, Freud, because you made a bomb of it.
They don't bother with the chairman. They just play the game between themselves. They're shouting across the floor at each other. Derek, I don't have to ask you because I know what the challenge was, and you have 19 seconds on Fiji, starting now.
When I landed at Nandi a couple of weeks ago, I was given the most wonderful lei. It was of most beautiful colour, put round my neck by this girl who was wearing only a grass skirt. And I thought, what a beautiful place to come to.
And Clement Freud is challenged.
That's the second beautiful.
Yes, it was indeed. There are 4 seconds for Fiji with you, Clement, starting now.
Particularly their open side wing forward who worked the ball.
Clement Freud was speaking as the whistle went. He's moving forward. He's only 1 point behind Derek Nimmo and Peter Jones, who are now equal in the lead. Peter, will you begin the next round? The subject is woodworm. Will you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
Actually, I know quite a lot about woodworm. They're terrible things if they get into the furniture, and particularly if you've got a wooden leg, it can, though I suppose I shouldn't really have said that because it may give offence. But anyway, if people are hurt by it...
Kenneth Williams a challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, I know. He troubled himself more than the people who might have been troubled by that, Peter. There are 47 seconds left for woodworm with you, Kenneth, starting now.
It is easy to recognize the work of these termites because there are tiny holes left by their entry and exit, so to speak, out of the timber. If the work is of an antique nature, you would be best employed to get an expert in and have him give you his opinion as to the best kind of...
Clement Freud challenge.
Repetition of best.
Yes, you said best advised and the best... whatever it was. 24 seconds are left for you on woodworm, Clement, starting now.
Well, woodworm really is one of the most exacting dishes to cook. You get the thing and you put it through a sieve with a stone or pestle, and then boil it...
Derek Nimmo challenged.
I think you wouldn't need to put it through a sieve, they'd drop through it.
I suppose you still could put them through the sieve even though they were dropped through a sieve. And maybe that's the way Clement Freud cooks. If he cooks woodworm, in no telling what he might do. He wasn't, strictly speaking, deviating from the subject.
Oh, he was rambling. It's absolute rubbish.
Of course he was. As much rubbish as some of you others talk on occasions. But, Clement, no, you have 13 seconds on woodworm starting now.
I remember a question in the National Geographical magazine of the United States of America in which a reader had written in to ask, is it true that woodworms land backwards? To which the answer was...
Clement, will we never know the answer?
Shall I tell you? Because
yes.
It really is quite nice. The questioner had said, is it true that woodworms jump backwards? And the answer was, a woodworm is a small, black, hard-backed, conically shaped insect which in projection lands facing the direction of takeoff.
And
underneath somebody had written, yes is the word you're searching for.
Clement, you've increased your lead at the end of that round by getting that extra point for speaking as the whistle went, and it's your turn to begin, and the subject is checks. Will you tell us something about those in just a minute, starting now?
Checks can be people who come from Czechoslovakia, or alternatively, they're bits of paper on which you order the bank to pay the recipient such sum of money as you have decided to inscribe on the place provided, always remembering to have put the date in the top right-hand corner and your signature wherever the particular organization which keeps your money instructs you to place that. The normal...
Peter Jones.
Hesitation.
Yes, indeed. There are 32 seconds for checks with you, Peter, starting now.
Checks are also a type of design often used in textiles and probably done better in Scotland than anywhere else, where they make the material into kilts, which they wear with great aplomb. Now, if you make a square, like a piece of crossword puzzle, and you put ink...
Derek Nimmo challenge.
Hesitation.
No, it wasn't enough for a hesitation. Peter, you keep the subject, and there are 13 seconds on check, starting now.
Well, these people who come from Czechoslovakia are more interesting in a way, partly because the name of the country occupies about 2 seconds of the time that I'm devoting to this subject. And they...
Well, Peter Jones kept going till the whistle went, gained an extra point for doing so, and he's gone 1 ahead of Clement Freud now into the lead. He's 3 ahead of Derek Nimmo and quite a few ahead of Kenneth Williams. And Kenneth, there's a great sympathy for you in the audience, Kenneth. And will you begin the next round? The subject, woodwind. Will you tell us something on that subject in just a minute, starting now?
Wind can, of course, occur anywhere, but a musician will say that in the wood it can produce the finest sounds that are known to the human ear. Now, the oboe is particularly pleasant. What can be more delightful than to hear one of these pieces of Mozart's played on that lovely instrument? It has a sort of mellifluous quality which floats or your ear, like the sweet south that breathes, as the poet has it, upon a bank of violets. And indeed, woodwind has been traditionally associated with the lyrical and the rejoicing nature of sound. And that is something...
Peter Jones has challenged.
Repetition of sound.
Yes, there was a lot of sound. And,
There generally is with woodwind. It's the whole point of it, isn't it?
And with Kenneth Williams. But you kept going for 49 seconds. Bad luck, Kenneth.
Oh, it's all his trick. He only comes in at the end. That's all he does. He comes in at the end, does the score. So he's interested. I just play the game. I mean, I'm interested in score.
No, he was fairly generous, Kenneth. He let the word ear go by before.
Oh, ear.
There are 11 seconds on woodwind, Peter, starting now.
Well, you can make a woodwind instrument out of practically anything as long as it's wood.
Derek Nimmo,
I came rather too soon.
Yes, I'm afraid you did. So Peter Jones has another point, and there are 6 seconds on woodwind starting now.
Even puffing air into a barrel, providing you have a number of holes on the other side, and you can...
So Peter Jones has increased his lead at the end of that round, and Derek Nimmo is going to begin the next round, and the subject is jogging. Something we've heard a lot about recently, but will you talk about it in just a minute, Derek, starting now?
I am terribly enthusiastic about jogging. I get up every morning round about 5:45, scrub myself down, sluice myself around, then put on my tracksuit and my plimsolls, and out I go into the road to start jogging. Along the pathways and roads and streets of Kensington, I jog. There I meet chums coming towards me, similarly attired, breathing heavily against the frosty air, and as I jogging away towards them...
Kenneth Williams has challenged.
I beg your pardon, I was challenged quite wrongly. I was in error.
I'm sorry?
I was in error.
Oh, you were in error. What a funny thing to say. Because the idea, by the way, of Derek getting up and sluicing himself before he goes out for a jog. Most people go for a jog and then come back and sluice themselves down.
It's got nothing to do with you, how I go about my jogging.
I don't believe a word.
Why don't you mind your own business? Let him jog how he likes.
34 seconds are left, Derek, on jogging, starting now.
I often find myself jogging my own memory with little tiny tricks that I play to myself. And I do find it very fascinating that when I go...
Peter Jones a challenge.
A repetition of myself.
Yes, I'm afraid so. There are 25 seconds left for jogging. It's with you now, Peter, starting now.
Well, it can be terribly dangerous, and I don't advise anybody to indulge in it. I think it's much wiser to stay in bed and have a drink. If you feel at all unwell, a drop of scotch perhaps served on a...
Clement Freud.
Hesitation.
Yes, there was just a hesitation there.
Well, there was a hesitation.
Well, you have to decide whether it was a long enough pause for a hesitation. I've decided it was on this occasion. Clement, you have 11 seconds to take over the subject of jogging, starting now.
I don't actually jog. I get all my exercise visiting friends of mine who have indulged in jogging and are now in hospitals. And they tend to be in wards on the 3rd and 4th floors.
Freud got the point for speaking as the whistle went. He has moved a little further towards Peter Jones, but hasn't caught him up. And I've just realized that we're coming to the end of our time, so let me now give you the final score. Kenneth Williams, though he contributed tremendously to the show, didn't get very many points. And he finished in 4th place. Derek Nimmo contributed his usual good value to our contest, and he finished up with a lot of points. He was 3 behind Clement Freud, and he was 3 behind this week's winner, who was Peter Jones. You have enjoyed this edition of Just a Minute, and we'll want to tune in again when once more we take the air and we play this delightful game. Until then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by David Hatch.
we present Kenneth Williams, Clement Freud, Kenneth Robinson, and Tim Brooke Taylor in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello and welcome once again to Just a Minute. Alongside our two regulars, we welcome two guests, Tim Brooke Taylor and Kenneth Robinson. And as usual, I'm going to ask them to speak, if they can, on some subject that I will give them, and they're going to try and do it without hesitation, without repetition, and without deviating from the subject which is on the card in front of me. And let us begin the show this week with Kenneth Williams. And who better? Oh, Kenneth, what a marvellous subject for you. Why I should be knighted. Well, Sir Kenneth, would you like to start off the show and tell us something on that subject in 60 seconds beginning now?
Why I should be knighted is something that was continually explained to me by a dear old friend who said he required a luxury blabberbock of the Dangle Chandelier, carry the acres of Catherine of Arabold, and said rise in the early morn with the wings of clarity in the Mylode.
Clement Freud has challenged you.
Repetition of non-words.
Which non-word did he repeat? You don't know? Tim Brooke Taylor has challenged.
Physphomanometer, twice.
No, he never said that twice. I consider that a wrong challenge, so you get a point for that, and you keep the subject, and there are 41 seconds left, starting now.
Knighthood, of course, we know, came to one.
Clement Freud.
Repetition of course.
You did say of course before, I'm afraid. Kenneth.
Where?
When you started.
Previously, when you were speaking.
I didn't. I did not.
If you like, I'll put it to the audience.
Well, they know I didn't say of course. I didn't say of course, did I?
If he said of course, cheer for him, and if not, boo for Clement, and all do it together now.
Hooray!
Yes, there
Bias
you are,
lot.
you see.
Clement, you continue with the subject, and there are 37 seconds left. Why I should be knighted, starting now.
If such an occasion were to arise, it would be naturally with due regard for merit, expertise, panache, and the sort of style with which I am intimately connected. Indeed, people often have said about me, he is a cult figure, and one who is due to receive and should get a tremendous amount of enthusiasm and applause. It should be forever ringing in his ears. The accolade is not created high enough.
Kenneth Williams is the only one to have any points. Clement Freud, will you take the second round, and the subject is what I put up with. There are 60 seconds, of course, starting now.
Well, the first thing I have to put up with is a totally ungrammatical question, which should actually read with what I put up. But what I put up with, for instance, is Kenneth Williams...
Kenneth Robinson has challenged.
Yes, repetition in reverse.
Ah, what a very subtle challenge. You are allowed to repeat the words on the card, Kenneth.
Yes.
So I'm sorry, I can't give it to you. And Clement continues, and there are 39 seconds left. What I put up with, starting now.
Who sits next to me making the most astonishing statements about why he should become a knight? I have always felt that what is needed in this country is a dishonours list. Every year they should get people, the newly undeserving, and strip from them such titles or bequests or honours.
Tim Brooke Taylor.
This is beginning to sound like a political party broadcast, and by definition is deviation.
And therefore it's deviation from the subject.
Deviation. Dead right. Deviation, that is deviation.
He's deviating from the subject of what I have to put up with, what I put up with. So, Tim, nice to hear from you. And there are 29 seconds left. Hello. And you have the subject of what I put up with, starting now.
Hammers, nails, chisels, electric drills. These are the implements what I put up with. Shelves, cupboards. Visitors who come for the night go on the divan, on one of those particular creations that spring to attention and crush your knee bone, and also give you a rupture. The guest never comes again because they are whisked off.
And Tim...
Sorry, could you just remind me what I'm talking about?
You actually challenged yourself?
Yes.
What was your challenge?
A deviation. I've
Deviation,
forgotten what
you're
I was talking
absolutely
about.
right.
Thank you very much.
You were deviating. So, as that's a correct challenge, you obviously must have a point for that.
Thank you very much.
Very good challenge. He's also having a drink of water to revive him. The thought of such quick thinking. Tim, you are 6 seconds left. The subject is what I put up with starting now.
Hundreds of fans who gather round me wherever I go, asking me for my autograph, bits of my clothing.
Well, Tim Brooke-Taylor was speaking then when the whistle went, and which, just to remind you, tells us the 60 seconds is up, so he got the extra point, including other points in the round, and at the end of that round, he is equal with Kenneth Williams. Kenneth Robinson, will you take the next round? And the subject is witchcraft. You have 60 seconds starting now.
Witchcraft, shall I take up, is a question that a lot of people must ask nowadays, especially there's such a large variety of them. Embroidery, sewing, knitting, carpentry, drawing, painting, sculpture, model making, playing instruments of all kinds, such as the saxophone, the clarinet, the drums, the piano, the violin, the cello, the double bass, and not only playing music, but also the art of witchcraft itself, which is something for which you cannot go to evening classes, as you know, but it is practiced a great deal at night, as readers of the spiritualist press will know. There was a story there the other day of a woman in Essex who said she was determined to go driving in the moonlight.
And Tim Brooke-Taylor challenged.
A hesitation.
No, driving in the moonlight.
So let's hear from Tim Brooke-Taylor again, because he had a correct challenge, and there are 18 seconds left. Witchcraft, Tim, starting now.
My mother's warts were cured by a witch. She passed her hands over my mother, and suddenly...
And the Clement Freud challenge.
Two mothers.
There were two mothers. Chairman, the subject is witchcraft. There are 13 seconds left, starting now.
Bubble, bubble, toilet trouble.
Tim.
Repetition.
Too much bubble, yes.
Double bubble, in fact.
You did hear what I said.
What?
No, we didn't, Clement.
No,
that was the
what
point.
What do you say?
It's a very beautiful howler. A child who said the witch's song went bubble, bubble, toilet trouble.
Are you wishing
Sorry,
you
I
hadn't
spoke.
said it?
Yes.
Right, so toilet trouble. I mean, the witchcraft is with Tim, and there are 11 seconds left, Tim, starting now.
Nicholas Parsons is witchcraft to me. When I see him on programmes, I think to myself, that man is inspired. He can cast a spell over me, and I look dumbfounded at someone who can carry on in such a brilliant, witty...
Tim, you so shattered the audience with those last remarks, I actually had to ask them to clap at the end because they didn't feel they could. But you did very well, including speaking as the whistle went, getting that extra point, so you are now in the lead at the end of that round.
I can
and
crawl
it's your
like the best of them.
turn to begin. Tim, the subject for you to take is Knickerbocker Glory.
No ho, us.
So, nice subject. I don't know if we've ever had any of them, but try and tell us something about them in 60 seconds, starting now.
The time to give up eating Knickerbocker Glories is when you no longer have to kneel on the stool to eat it. They are provided in large, tall glasses, which only can be reached by standing on one's feet and eating this ludicrous concoction, which is green, red, yellow, and beginning to sound like Kenneth Williams.
And Kenneth Williams has challenged you, too.
That's probably why.
Deviation.
Why is he...
The subject is Knickerbocker Glory, not what he sounds like. The subject is Knickerbocker Glory. I don't need to remind you, as chairman, of your job in this programme, to keep things under control.
Yes, certainly, Kenneth. I'm very sorry, Kenneth. Do you wish me to make a decision, Kenneth? He's looking so
I think I'll be
severe.
as slow as in answering as he is.
You never have yet. Why should you start coming to this?
I try to give them the cues, and they sometimes take them up. Kenneth, yes, talking about you is deviating from a Knickerbocker Glory, though I have been compared to some on occasions, I do know that.
There are 42 seconds left for you to take over the subject, starting now.
I am delighted to have the subject of Knickerbocker Glory, because I remember as a child being given one of these in a milk bar. It was deliciosa, as the Spanish always say. And a cherry topped this whipped cream, and when you dug your spoon deep down, you found fruit and jam and all kinds of delicious concocciones, as the French always have it, depending on...
Clement Freud challenge.
Repetition of always.
Yes.
Awfully niggling, isn't it? Very niggling and nasty, isn't it? Not generous at all. You don't let anyone get underway, do you?
I'd have challenged him on that concocciones as the French would always have it. I've never heard the French say that in their lives.
But you've never been there, you great nit. Nothing about travel at all. You've been as far as Margate and fainted.
How did you know I'd been as far as Margate?
Well, it's about all you look as though you've been. I mean, your knowledge can hardly be called worldly, can you?
Right, so Clement Freud has a correct challenge, and there are 16 seconds on Knickerbocker Glory, starting now.
I've always been very fond of
Tim
it.
Brooke Taylor challenge.
Hesitation.
There was indeed. In fairness to Clement...
No, go on, give it to him. He's right. He got his challenge, didn't he?
He's got to have it, but I must, for the sake of the listeners, and in fairness to Clement Freud, point out that you were trying to kiss him at that moment, so it's very difficult from the start.
There's nothing in the game says you can't kiss people. What do you mean? We don't live in a Gestapo country.
There are 14 seconds left. Tim Brooke Taylor, you have the subject. Knickerbocker Glory.
It was a bribe, my...
Clement Freud challenge.
Hesitation?
Yes, but it's the first time he's been on the programme, and so he's allowed a few little starting... Little bit of starting hesitation. There are still with you, Tim. We won't count that. And there are 13 and a half seconds. Knickerbocker Glory starting now.
I would only go into the school.
Clement Freud.
Deviation.
Why?
First time on the programme, he started very quickly. You can't beg for licence and then withdraw.
You get a point for that challenge. You didn't get one for the last one.
Thank you very much.
Tim has a point. There are 12 seconds left for Knickerbocker Glory, Tim, starting now.
If I were given a Knickerbocker Glory. I agreed to this, and unfortunately gave a whole new meaning to a Technicolor yawn over my housemaster's carpet. Mr. and Mrs. Knickerbocker had a daughter called Gloria. However, they...
Kenneth Williams, we're back with you, and the subject is Herman Ebbinghaus. So, Ebbinghaus, would you tell us something about him in just a minute, starting now?
Herman Ebbinghaus has carved a niche for himself in the history of psychology and indeed psychoanalysis, since his speciality was a delving into the higher mental states which constitute, so to speak, the memory bank of each individual. And his particular type of treatment lay in having the patient totally horizontal and completely at ease. Almost mesmeric was the technique, whereby he could have a flooding out of the past, which all contained there in the back of the cerebral, whatever it is. What went wrong? Now, was that What went wrong? Was I challenged?
Yes, Clement Freud rather aptly challenged you on that
what a
a little
pity.
bit, yes.
Hesitation, I'm afraid.
Undoubtedly,
It
dry.
wasn't hesitation. I was really trying to think of the word, actually. I was hesitating at all. I don't look
Your
like a
own
hesitator.
cerebral powers let you down with only 1 second to go.
That's just like him. That's just like him, isn't it? That's just like him to come in there after somebody has done all the work. He comes in there for a cheap score. I mean, so cheap, isn't it? I wouldn't stoop for that kind of thing. I don't care who wins. I mean, I just come play the game. You know, I don't bother myself. But he's got to come in there to the last minute. I think it's awful.
Yeah, it's almost as bad as kissing the fellow just as he's about to start, isn't it?
I know, but it's fun, isn't it?
There's 1 second left for Clement Freud on Irving. I'm so sorry.
He's completely illiterate. He can't even say it.
Herman Ebbinghaus. 1 second, starting now.
Herman Ebbinghaus.
Well done. Clement Freud got the point for speaking as the whistle went. He's just ahead of Kenneth Williams. He's 3 points behind Tim Brooke-Taylor, our leader, and Kenneth Robinson is in 4th place. And Clement Freud, it's your turn to begin. The subject is Raffles. Will you tell us something about him in just a minute, starting now?
Sir Henry Raffles is particularly well known for having founded the hotel of his name in Singapore, which some people pronounce Singapore with a hard G, but I don't. It is one of the great luxury palaces of the East.
Tim Brooke-Taylor.
Repetition of Singapore?
No.
Well, it's a debatable thing. He said
it's not debatable at all. I'm sorry, if you're
Singapore.
going to play this game properly, if your pronunciation, we could all change every word and pronounce it differently in different regional
I was about
accents.
Quite right. It's quite right. Absolutely genuine. Very valid point, Tim. I'm glad. He's very sharp, that. Very sharp, very sharp.
I was about to say exactly that.
Yeah, thank you.
But if you start going off, Kenneth Williams will join in, and then Clement Freud, and maybe even Kenneth Robinson, you never know. And then we will have chaos, which often reigns in this programme and becomes very difficult. Yes, I agree with your challenge, Tim, and you have 30...
We're going to lose all our Far Eastern repeats.
You shut up. The chairman's in charge, and he's a lovely fellow, the chairman.
I think you've helped to gain us a few by pointing out the mispronunciation on occasions, Clement. 46 seconds left for Raffles. With you, Tim, starting now.
The only time I've ever won a raffle is when I've drawn it. And that is an embarrassing situation because quite clearly you cannot keep what you have taken out of the hat.
Kenneth Robinson.
Yes, hesitation.
Yes,
he's new.
Hmm?
He hasn't played the game very often.
I haven't said hesitation
And
before.
he hasn't played the game very much either. 36 seconds left for Raffles, Kenneth Robinson, starting now.
The only unfortunate occasion when I won a raffle was when I was in the Croydon Empire and I heard the manager calling my number and I went up onto the stage and the man was standing there with a frying pan, which he wondered what to do with because that week I'd just been sacked from the Croydon Advertiser for saying that the shows...
Kenneth Williams.
Two Croydons.
Yes, Croydon came in twice.
Different kinds of Croydons.
There are 22 seconds left. Kenneth Williams, Raffles, starting now.
Stamford Raffles served under Lord Minto and was there when Java was captured. And he wrote a fantastic history of that particular piece of terrain. And then, of course, we know he went to Singapore. Now, it's certainly... Who interrupted?
Clement Freud did.
Hesitation.
When you paused, he interrupted.
Somebody was talking while I was...
The audience were talking. They were discussing your brilliance and your genius. Clement, there are 3 seconds on Raffles starting now.
The tickets are red, blue, pink, yellow, green, orange, blue.
Tim Brooke-Taylor challenged.
I don't want him to win, basically.
So, what is your challenge?
What's a good challenge?
Repetition.
Repetition of winning.
He's always winning.
He's always winning. Of always getting in just before the...
Yes, exactly. He's always just getting in. You know, the niggly bits at the end.
Niggly bits. Well, actually, as you're way out in the lead and you're winning comfortably.
Very nice to be there.
And actually, it was a very... I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll give you a point for a very good challenge because it was a very original one. And Clement Freud keeps the subject. And there's a 1/5 of a second to go, starting now. Seems the only fair way to do it, so Clement gets the point for speaking as the whistle went. Tim Brooke-Taylor still in the lead, 2 ahead of Clement Freud. Kenneth Williams in 3rd place, and Kenneth Robinson trailing a little. And Kenneth Robinson, your turn to begin. The subject is How Others See Me. Would you tell us something about that? Just a minute, starting now.
How Others See Me. Now, How Others See Me is a very good subject, and I'm very glad that Mr. Parsons has told us that we can repeat the title, because I could say How Others See Me a great many times and probably keep it up for a minute, but I won't.
Clement Freud has tried.
Repetition of very. He said it 3 times now.
He did, didn't he?
It's not on the card.
But he hadn't really got going.
No, he hadn't. He's new.
He's new.
He hasn't played it a lot.
Give him another chance.
But if he says very another 6 times, we just might...
If he says very once more... You can challenge him. And you can only repeat the subject on the card a limited number of times, Kenneth. So you carry on with How Others See Me, and there are 50 seconds left, starting now.
How Others See Me is something I know very well because they never hesitate to tell me. Many examples come to mind. One, a make-up girl in television who said, we must keep those bags under the eyes, Mr. Robinson. They are so good for the character, even if their heaviness does pull you forward onto the keyboard when you try to play the piano. Another friend, not such a friend now,
Tim Brooke Taylor.
Repetition, sadly, he's got so many friends.
No, she was a friend and then she was not a friend.
Another friend. There's no friend there sitting beside you because he picked you up on friend.
I'm sorry,
which you did
he's new, you know.
And there are 28 seconds for Tim on How Others See Me starting now.
There is a gentleman who lives opposite me who uses binoculars. As I go into the garden, looking at the pathetic bit of grass that I call a lawn, I see the glint from these...
Clement Freud.
I want him to win. I'd like him to have a point.
Tit for tat, all right. You have the point for that, and Tim keeps the subject. There are 20 seconds left, Tim, starting now.
One of the most unpleasant things as far as an actor is concerned are reviews of a performance that he may be in. The nice ones you don't believe and the nasty ones you do.
What is your challenge?
Hesitation.
Kenneth Robinson.
Quite right.
The subject is How Others See Me, and there are 8 seconds left, Kenneth, starting now.
A girl who writes for The Observer called Victoria Radin, who I always think of as Nadia, described me as all eyes, all ears. She didn't say anything of the kind.
Clement
She didn't say anything of the kind.
2 alls.
The 2 alls, I'm afraid. Clement's got in the game with 1 second to go on How Others See Me, starting now.
5 foot 10.
And Tim Brooke Taylor challenged.
I still don't want him to win, I'm sorry. Nothing has changed. I mean, he lets us, you know,
do all the slogging.
Yeah, do all the slogging to the last
we're
one.
doing all the
I've heard you. I've heard on the radio as I drive home. I hear Kenneth going on and on and on, and that sly beggar over the phone. Just at the last minute, he's got a stopwatch there. Everybody, he's got a stopwatch. Just 59 seconds and gone. He goes repetition of.
I quite agree. And it's the first time anyone's had the guts to air those views on the programme. The first time justice has been done. You're quite right, Tim. Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, all I can say is a lot of people who listen on their car radios entirely to hear you going off just as you've gone off now.
Ah, how lovely of them. How beautiful. How wonderful.
And Tim, in spite of what you said, you're still in a very strong lead ahead of Clement Freud. Okay. You're doing very well. You're giving good value, so that's what the public like. They don't mind if you don't get in just before the end. You're in the lead, and it's your turn to start. The subject is Schooldays. 60 seconds starting now.
Dinky Cosgrove, Michael Bates, Susan Byron Thompson, Robert Bolton King, John Dagger, Miss...
Clement Freud.
Well, first of all, I wanted to get in at the beginning to make that. But secondly, he's not talking about school days, he's talking about school boys.
Dinky Cowton is not a schoolboy.
How can you have school days without schoolboys and schoolgirls?
Very easily, it's not on the card. You
can't. It's not deviating.
School days are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You want to repeat yourself.
Yes, but you can't deviate from your school days without associating with the school chums that were there with you. And
Look what happens when you come in early. Pathetic, isn't it? I mean, if you came in late, it's easy, but coming in early, it goes to pieces.
I disagree with the challenge, so you keep the subject, and there are 51 seconds on school days starting now.
John Dagger, Robin...
Clement Freud challenge.
Repetition of John.
Of John, yes, one of them was called John, the other... So he's got it early this time, and there are 48 seconds on school days with you, Clement, starting now.
They are reputed to be the happiest days of your life, and they certainly were not of mine. Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We didn't have a lot of school on Saturdays or Sundays, but even so, they were pretty miserable. I remember having to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning because the school to which I went, which was in Devon, gave you 4pence...
Tim Brooke Taylor challenge.
Which?
Oh, yes, which?
The
school to which you went, which was in Devon. Very well listened, wasn't it?
Marvellous. And the and a. We're challenging on prepositions now.
It's known as witchcraft, in fact.
No. There are 28 seconds, Tim, on school day starting now.
Sheila.
Clement Freud. Hesitation. Yes, I agree. You really didn't get going that time.
You
Tim.
don't know. She's called Sheila. Oh, look, you've never heard of Sheila?
I've heard of a chap trying to wriggle out of a very definite hesitation. No, there was over a second there before you got going. I've got to be fair and keep the thing going because we're into the last round.
You know. I am new, and I'm only doing one show this series.
But after your performance today, you're undoubtedly to be asked back to do another series.
You've won me round.
There are 27 seconds on school days, Clement, starting now. Tim Brooke Taylor challenge.
Hesitation.
Yes, and just shows that Clement Freud can be very generous when he wants to as well. In spite of the things.
If he's going to be kind, I'm not playing. Well, that's when King Rat gives away the sweets. I never like that in a pantomime. You've got to be consistent.
That's right. Well, Tim, back to the game. There are 25 seconds left. Schooldays starting now.
I was not only a schoolboy, but I was a schoolmaster at the same school 5 years after I'd left as a pupil. This was a strange experience because I found that people who had taught me were my colleagues. Miss Pink, for example, a lovely lady who had seemed extremely tall and
I'm afraid hesitation. I don't like doing this, mind you, because I know he's new.
He's so good at the game, I wouldn't give him any quarter at all. We don't usually do this to our guest, Kenneth, but you have got in, and there are 7 seconds left for Schooldays starting now.
Mine were quite delightful because, you see, I got in, so to speak, with the head boy. So no one could come up and dash me.
Well, as I said a little while ago, we were coming towards the end of the show, and we now have no more time left, so we quickly wind up by giving you the final score. And our guest, Kenneth Robinson, playing for the first time, finished up in 4th place. He was a little way behind Kenneth Williams, who was in 3rd place, and he was 4 points behind Clement Freud. And Clement Freud, in 2nd place, was 4 points behind our guest, who has come for the first time and triumphed, Tim Brooke-Taylor, winner of this week. We do hope you've enjoyed this edition of Just a Minute, and will want to tune in again. Till then, from all of us here, goodbye.
The chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Messiter and produced by David Hatch.
Present Kenneth Williams, Peter Jones, Aimi MacDonald and Patrick Moore in Just a Minute. And as the minute waltz fades away, here to tell you about it is our chairman, Nicholas Parsons.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and welcome once again to Just a Minute. And as you've just heard, we welcome back two guests who've been with us before, Aimi MacDonald and Patrick Moore, to play with 2 of our regulars, Kenneth Williams and Peter Jones. The rules are the same. They're going to try and speak for just a minute if they can on a subject I will give them, without hesitation, repetition, or deviating from the subject. And you will see how well they do that as we start the programme this week with Peter Jones. Peter, the subject is foolishness. Can you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
Well, there's a lot of it about. And I suppose there always has been throughout history. In fact, what is the story of civilization but the foolishness and the extraordinary dim-witted...
Aimi MacDonald has challenged you.
It's a bit sort of hesitant, isn't
It was more. It was definite
It's just
hesitation.
a manner of speaking. It's not a hesitation.
It may be a manner of speaking, but you can't speak like that in just a minute, because it's hesitation.
It's so boring, Di, apart from everything else.
Yes.
Good night,
So
all.
Aimi MacDonald... Aimi MacDonald has challenged, and as it's a correct challenge, which I agree with, she gets a point for that, and she takes over the subject of foolishness, and there are 47 seconds left, starting now.
Well, I mean, foolishness is so silly. I mean, one has to be sensible about life. It's so ridiculous to go through the whole shebang being absolutely, uncontrollably, impeccably stupid. It's much better to be irrevocably...
Patrick Moore has challenged.
I nearly said... I was trying to say irrevocably.
Well, I appreciate what you're trying to say, but you hesitated doing so.
Yeah. She not only hesitated, I think she deviated from correct English. But anyway, Patrick...
And I didn't think it was all that interesting either.
Patrick, you have a point for a correct challenge, and you take over the subject of foolishness, and there are 29 seconds left, starting now.
Foolishness is indeed a characteristic of civilization. Going back to ancient times, consider for one moment, if you will, the ancient Athenians. They...
Aimi MacDonald.
The two things.
No, two ancients.
Two ancients.
Yes, not
yes.
two things.
Yes, right.
And Aimi, you have the subject back with a point for a correct challenge, and 21 seconds left, starting now.
I think foolishness can be actually quite fun at times. I mean, Kenneth Williams would not understand that because he's always so incredible.
Peter Jones, a challenge.
I'm very glad you mentioned Kenneth Williams because the audience probably at home don't realise that he's with us.
Thank you very much for pointing that out.
Very thoughtful of you, very thoughtful of you.
Yes, well, he has...
I don't need you. I can talk to myself. You talk about me as I'm some mute idiot, Sidney.
No, we were just trying to coax you out of your shell.
I was fascinated by that woman there. I was fascinated by her. I think they should have more women on this show. Give them enough rope, they hang themselves.
Peter, what is your challenge, actually? Because that wasn't...
It wasn't really a challenge, it was just a sort of comment.
So, Aimi MacDonald, therefore, have you interrupted
I get a pound. What am I talking about?
No, you don't get any money.
Point.
The BBC can't afford that. You have...
I get a point, huh?
You get a point because you were interrupted and no correct challenge. And there are 14 seconds left. Foolishness starting now.
You see, if one is silly about things, then one doesn't really understand the importance of it, so therefore it doesn't really affect one.
Patrick Moore.
Hesitation, or rather another standstill.
Yes, a complete halt, and 3 ones as well, but nobody
I
picked up
keep
on it.
forgetting that. I'm awfully bad at that, aren't I?
But you're so good in other ways, Amy, I wouldn't worry. Patrick, you have 4 seconds on foolishness, starting now.
Foolishness is prevalent in the modern world. One has only to look at the television or listen to the radio.
When Ian Messiter blows his whistle, it tells us that the 60 seconds is up, and whoever is speaking at that moment gains an extra point. On this occasion was Patrick Moore. Kenneth Williams, the subject is teacups. Can you tell us something about that in just a minute, Kenneth, starting now?
When I hold mine delicately poised in my beautifully manicured hands, I think automatically...
Aimi MacDonald is challenged.
And beautifully manicured hands. Have you seen his hands?
Well, I hate to judge on whether his hands are beautifully manicured or not, but let us say that they have been manicured, so therefore we won't judge on the person who actually did the manicure and say he was an incorrect challenge, and Kenneth has 55 seconds to continue.
To shut her great mouth, cheek.
It's part of the game to open one's big mouth, and you do it beautifully, Kenneth.
But I do it in a complimentary. I say nice things.
Nice.
Always. I'm known as a great charmer.
Yeah. In the most outrageous way. Right, Kenneth, there are 55 seconds for teacups, starting now.
One thinks automatically of Josiah Spode and the incredible use to which he put feldspar and bone to create this translucent porcelain which became so popular with tea drinkers, and the cups that you hold made by that gentleman were edifying, not only in the sense that you were having the nectar coming to the lips most delicately, but also...
Patrick.
He's talking about drinking nectar. These are teacups.
He was suggesting that the tea...
No,
he was suggesting the tea became nectar when it came out of the
That's it. You got it. You got it. He's brilliant. What a chairman. There's no rubbish there. He's a marvellous chairman.
It doesn't become nectar. When it comes,
He's in one of his charming moods today.
Shut up. I'm throbbing with it. Go on.
So while Kenneth is still throbbing, I'll tell him he has 24 seconds on teacups starting now.
A lot of people associate scandalous chatter behind the teacups and say, oh, they're having a little babble together, aren't they? And once they get there with the scones, we keep...
Peter Jones has challenged.
Well, he said they 3 times in a very short space of time.
He did, actually, yes. And while we let you get away with it maybe twice, 3 days in quick succession is repetition, 15 seconds left on teacups with you, Peter, starting now.
What can be more pleasant than the chink of china as the teacup is lowered into the saucer and then the teaspoon tossed into it? And then...
That's rubbish. Nobody tosses spoons. I mean, if they did, it goes splosh all over your friends. They'd be covered in bits of tea and stuff. It'd be disgraceful. Absolute deviation. I don't think that is any part of English behaviour. We simply don't toss spoons around. We toss cabers, yes. And we toss pancakes.
Not with a
Shrove Tuesday. Tossing them up in the air and then pancakes. Here's your pancakes.
You can't toss capers with...
No, you can't even say it. Toss capers.
Kenneth, we've got to give a decision on this. That last laugh, listeners, was due to the fact that Kenneth has now decided to strip off. And he's taken his jacket from the peg and put it on his chair. And Kenneth, I agree. I mean, if he describes the chink of teacups so delicately and then he talks about tossing the spoon in, the delicacy has disappeared. So your challenge is correct. There are 6 seconds left. Teacups starting now.
We all say, do we not? Have a nice cup of tea with your dish.
Did you all say, do we not? I don't.
That's a figure of speech, Patrick, so it's not correct deviation.
Well, so was tossing the teacup.
It was teaspoons anyway, so I was listening, so it's not correct what you've just challenged on. There's 1 second left with you, Kenneth. Teacup starting now.
Tea is delicious when it's open out.
Well, Kenneth was speaking as the whistle went, got that extra point, and as you see, he didn't need Peter Jones's help to bring him out of his shell at the beginning, because once he comes out of his shell, there's no holding him, is there?
And you can't get him back into it again.
He's got a commanding lead at the end of that round, and Patrick Moore's going to begin the next round of the subject, aptly for you, Patrick, the curvature of space. Will you tell us something about that, your own field of knowledge, starting now?
Space can, in fact, be curved. If you look at space anywhere in this world, or outside it for that matter, you will find that it's by no means straight. And by this I mean linear, non-curvature, the Einstein-Riemannian complex, as described way back in the year 1924, not by either of these gentlemen, whom I didn't in fact meet, but by another, whose name was Lobachevsky. He was naturally a Russian. He could hardly be anything else with a name like that. I mean, after all, could he be anything except a measure of the Soviet Union?
Aimi MacDonald.
I didn't want to stop you down because you were so beautiful, but he said anything twice.
Yes, he did. You were listening very well, Amy, and there are 33 seconds for the curvature of space.
She walks right into it, doesn't she?
Now listen, Amy MacDonald fills a very nice space with plenty of curvature, and she can talk it on that way if she wishes. And there
we all know about your proclivities.
Please keep your private life to yourself. There are 33 seconds left, Amy, starting now.
I just thought of something. Once upon a time, I actually took a flying lesson. And there I was, up in the sky, with my instructor by my side, looking out of the window, and what did I see? A curvature of space, which is commonly known as the horizon.
Patrick, you challenged.
Oh, hesitation.
I think you're right.
Horizon, she stopped completely.
Yes, so she got...
I know. Why do I do that? Because I knew what I was going to say.
Well, I know, but we were all looking at you. In fact, it was quite a long time before anybody buzzed. They couldn't believe it. But, Amy, you did say something very effectively within the 20 seconds you went, and the curvature of space is now back with Patrick with 14 seconds to go, starting now.
Can space be curved? Look at the horizon, as we already heard, and you may imagine that this is so.
Peter Jones.
Well, he's repeating what she said.
Yes,
again,
but he didn't say it before, so
he said, as we have heard. It's so boring to hear the same thing over again.
It's very boring, very boring.
Anyway, his whole delivery sounds like the Open University. It's not it's not like just a minute. It sounds like just an hour and a half.
I will do what I've done in the past sometimes. We give Peter Jones a bonus point for the value of his comments, but they were incorrect, and Patrick keeps the subject. He gets a point for an incorrect challenge, though, Patrick, and there are 8 seconds left. The curvature of space, starting now.
Well, I was finding myself during the war. I was finding about the other. I was really very hard at it.
Aimi MacDonald challenge.
Oh, darling, you can't understand what he's saying, so how can you possibly...
Well, how can I get it right? You accuse me of being slow and boring. Now you accuse me of going too fast. It's not fair. I know your best on this program. I can only say, or on the thing, that I feel I'm being penalised.
We give Patrick...
I can't get it right, can I? Oh, all right, Kenneth, thank you very much.
We give Patrick
Moore...
I
decided to stay.
That's right. We give Patrick Moore a bonus point for the best theatrical performance of the year. We can't give him an Oscar because we don't award them, but Aimi MacDonald a point for a correct challenge, and she has 5 seconds on the curvature of space, starting now.
There I was in my little cabin, taking...
Repetition we've already heard about, a cabin.
Yes, there you were. You did repeat that before. So Kenneth has the subject...
We've all heard it, don't keep on, we've heard all...
Aimi, no, you did say, there I was.
There I was, of course.
But you said that before. And that's
Where
what...
else was I?
And she just...
But you repeated the words, and that's what Kenneth
And
challenged
she's just
for.
boring us by saying it again, if I may say so.
Yes.
Kenneth, you have 3 seconds on the curvature of space, starting now.
Well, it naturally does this because the human eye appears... almost exactly comparable to curvature of the spine.
Kenneth, we have finished that round.
Oh, sorry.
You've unluckily got a round of applause.
Curvature of the spine.
Yeah. Looks like curvature of somewhere else, the way you illustrated. You've got a point for speaking as the whistle went. The audience have applauded your virtuosity and other things as well. And you've increased your lead. You're 2 ahead of Patrick Moore. You're 3 ahead of Aimi MacDonald and 6 ahead of Peter Jones. And Aimi MacDonald, it's your turn to begin. Oh, what a lovely subject. Spiders in the bath. I don't know whether you've had any in the bath, Aimi, but would you tell us something about them in 60 seconds, starting now?
I've never actually been in the bath with a spider, but I shall tell you what I do in order to avoid this. The important thing to remember, girls, is put the plug in.
Kenneth
no, I
Williams.
was going to say something terribly important.
I think this is deviation of the worst kind because it was tell you girls, and the assumption therefore is that it's specifically for women, and surely that's racial discrimination of the worst kind. Why should not men have the benefit of this fabulous advice about spiders?
Because it might be revealed that she has something specific to say to women with spiders in the bath. And that could be revealed later. She goes on talking because she wasn't actually deviating from the subject. So,
anyway, no ordinary man would be afraid of a spider.
So, Aimi, you have 47 seconds to continue on the subject of spiders in the bath, starting now.
When one hears about spiders in the bath, one automatically assumes that they come up through the drain pipe into the little plug hole.
Patrick Moore.
Repetition of plug.
Oh!
She said plug before.
Yes, she did say plug before. You did, actually, yes.
No, this was plug hole. It was a hyphenated word.
That's right, plug hole. You're right, quite right, Peter. Yes, yes. Aimi, you have 37 seconds for spiders in the bath, starting now.
The important thing to remember, ladies, is to get out of the bath before you pull the chain out of the...
Right.
It was hesitation, which wouldn't dare say plug a third time.
No, I know.
I was trying to think of another word.
I know you were.
I know, but the trouble is because you paused, everybody thought you were putting another chain while you were sitting in the bath. Patrick, you have the subject. There are 29 seconds on spiders in the bath, starting now.
It is perfectly true that spiders do come out through the plug, and this I'm entitled to say, as I've not said it before.
Yes, Peter.
Repetition.
What?
Repetition of as I'm entitled to say.
No, he hasn't repeated that before. Aimi said it before.
I buzzed as well,
but spiders can't come through the plug. They can come through the plug hole, yes.
Yes, I'm objecting to the same thing that Amy's objecting to.
What's that?
Whatever it is.
That spiders cannot come through the plug.
Of course they can't. They
come
can't.
through the plug. Oh, no, it's impossible. Have you ever seen a spider go through a plug?
I'm surprised that someone who's a so-called expert
should...
He's
not an expert on plug holes, he's an expert on space.
No, that's painfully obvious.
Peter, you have 23 seconds on spiders in the bath starting now.
Anyway, I always tend to identify with the spider, and I visualise myself in a porcelain bowl the size of Wembley Stadium, and a huge manhole is taken up and I'm flushed down it. And this must be a really ghastly experience for a spider, even one who's had a lot of adventures with flies and wasps and even bees and larger insects, because that's a dangerous life.
So Peter Jones, having got the subject, kept going for probably the longest spell in this show, gained that extra point for speaking as the whistle went, and he's still in fourth place. But he's gives us good value as usual, and Kenneth Williams is still in the lead. But Peter, it is your turn to begin. The subject is the fun of spending. Can you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
Funnily enough, I was strolling down Oxford Street only yesterday, watching the shoplifters, and I reflected that many people find more fun in getting something for nothing than they do actually spending things to get it. And I don't know whether you're...
Patrick Moore, challenge.
And, is that...
Yes, that's hesitation, definitely, Patrick. You have 43 seconds for the subject of the fun of spending, starting now.
The fun of spending. This is a term that takes us back to the years, going back at least one decade now, because it was fun to spend in those days when it was possible to retain any money to spend. This, alas, is not the case today. The great changeover came with the conversion to decimal coinage. This, of course, was known to be the biggest confidence trick ever played upon an unsuspecting public, and everybody got away with it.
Peter Jones, a challenge.
They weren't unsuspecting, they suspected.
That is a very clever challenge. Shall I put that to the wiser judgment of our audience? Now, if you consider that that challenge was good enough to deserve a point, and therefore the round, you cheer for Peter Jones, and if you decide that it wasn't, you boo and support Patrick, and you all do it together now. The cheers have it. You agree with Peter. They did suspect, and Peter has the subject. There are 22 seconds. The fun of spending, starting now.
And no doubt this fear has been confirmed, because the pound in their pocket was not still worth the same amount, but it's worth a great deal less. And it's very difficult to even remember how much it cost to ride on a bus. It used to be a penny and a halfpenny, and you used to be worried about handing it.
So Peter Jones is catching up, gaining more points in that round, including the one for speaking as the whistle went. He's only one behind Aimi, and he's two behind our joint leaders, Patrick Moore and Kenneth Williams. Kenneth, we're back with you to begin, and the subject is Francois-Marie Arouet. I'm sure that you must know something about it, otherwise Ian Messiter wouldn't have thought of the subject for you. But will you tell us something now, in just a minute, starting now?
There is a theory that this is some sort of word coined by him for a...
Peter Jones.
Hesitation.
I'm afraid it was, Kenneth.
Yes, well, there you are.
Hesitation. So,
Well, anyway, I knew it was Voltaire, and I knew that the name Voltaire was a coinage of Arouet, and...
well, why'd you tell them? They may not know that.
Well, I've got it out anyway.
Right, Peter Jones, you have the subject. You have 47 seconds. Francois-Marie Arouet, starting now.
Well, he was the Frenchman who inadvertently invented limbo dancing when he tried to get into a paid toilet for nothing.
Well done. Aimi, what is your challenge?
I don't believe that, darling.
I didn't actually hear because he always laughs so loud. What was the last line you said, Peter?
Is it true?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. I can take you to... Well, I can't, actually, no.
So what, it's quite near the Louvre, isn't it?
Aimi, what was your challenge?
Oh, well, I just thought deviation, because I'm sure it's a load of rubbish, darling.
Well, isn't it all?
Yes, so you can talk a load of rubbish, providing you don't deviate from the subject on the card, and we cannot prove that he wasn't, so Peter keeps the subject, and there are 44 and a half seconds left, starting now.
His son, actually, was living near the Louvre when he met this other Frenchman. This is a rather involved story, so I ought really to give them names. We will call
Kenneth Williams.
Deviation. He didn't have a son. It's totally deviation. I mean, the whole thing is devious to a degree.
I think he was getting pretty far away from
It was just deviation. He didn't have a son. That's all there was to it, yes.
So, maybe the character he was rubbishing on about was...
We don't know what he's talking about.
No, I know he doesn't, but it's not unusual in just a minute. There are 34 seconds for you, Kenneth, to take over the subject of Francois-Marie Arouet starting now.
I am the only one here competent to discuss this subject, and...
Patrick Moore, challenge.
This is not true. We can all discuss Arouet, because Arouet was not the man whom you say he was. Not a man at all.
So I think that's an incorrect challenge, but we are all competent to discuss him, so therefore that was a correct challenge, Patrick. So you now have the subject with 30 seconds to go, starting now.
Arouet was, in fact, a horse who was entered for the Grand National way back in the year 1924. This was something of a mistake, as the animal...
Kenneth Williams.
Two somethings.
Yes, that's right, Kenneth. Well listened. There are 22 seconds now on Francois-Marie Arouet, starting now.
When Voltaire went in his youth in the company of Chateauneuf to Holland with his master, who was the ambassador, he had an affair with a girl there, which caused an appalling scandal, and they made him return to Paris. And very shortly after that, he incurred the wrath of Orleans, who was regent of France, and he was banished and sent to the
Peter
Bastille.
Jones, a challenge.
How does he know he didn't have a son?
One of those challenges on which we cannot make an accurate decision, so we give Peter Jones a bonus point for his...
You're always giving him bonus
He deserves bonus points. He gets one for that, and you keep the subject, Kenneth, and there are 14 seconds left, starting now.
He came over here as a result of another banishment and met Chesterfield, after whom that kind of sofa is named, and then he returned to Switzerland, where he lived because he was in great fear.
So Kenneth Williams got that extra point for speaking as the whistle went, and of course other points in that round. Patrick, will you begin the next round? The subject is bridge. Will you tell us something about that in just a minute, starting now?
Bridge can have two meanings. There is this thing that stretches across a river, and these can be extremely dangerous. There was one famous case where one of these, over a river somewhere in Scotland...
Peter Jones, a challenge.
Repetition of river.
Yes, that is right, yes. There are 49 seconds left for bridge with you, Peter Jones, starting now.
Well, of course, there are many more than two kinds of bridges. Some people wear them in their mouths, and other people use them to get from one point to another.
Aimi MacDonald.
Did he do two peoples?
He did do two peoples, yes.
Yes, well, he would do, yes.
He used the word people. He didn't do two people, but he spoke...
Yes, I did, yes.
There are 40 seconds for you, Amy, on the subject of bridge, starting now.
Bridge over the River Kwai. It's a thing that stretches from one bank to another and is spelt B-R-I-D-G-E.
She's done it again.
He's making me laugh.
Patrick, challenge.
Hesitation.
Hesitation, full stop, yes.
Kenneth is making me laugh.
Well, he's not the only person. Patrick, you have a correct challenge. There are 25 and a half seconds on bridge, starting now.
Bridge is also a very famous and skillful card game. There are four suits: diamonds, spades, hearts, and clubs. Each of these has a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6, a 7, an 8, a 9, a 10, a jack, a queen, a king, an ace, or if you prefer, a knave. Some of these packs also contain a joker. The art of bridge is to maintain one's bidding. Now, this can be extremely...
It's very interesting that only 1 point separates our four contestants. Aimi MacDonald had 9 points. She was only 1 behind Peter Jones with 10 points, and he was only 1 behind Patrick Moore, who had obviously 11 points, and he was obviously only 1 point behind Kenneth Williams, who had 12 points, and is this week's winner, Kenneth Williams!
Chairman of Just a Minute was Nicholas Parsons. The programme was devised by Ian Rossiter and produced by David Hatch.